Oh my God, I had to wake up to come over today. Like, does it ring?
I can jump
You
up.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay, would you please turn your microphones on and pull them forward and we'll get started. I'd like to call the May 13th, 2019 meeting of the Town of Niskayuna Planning Board and Zoning Commission to order. Mr. Twitty, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Shenfield,
Here.
Ms. Gold,
Here.
Mr. Khan,
Here.
Mr. McPartlin,
Here.
Mr. Oster,
Here.
Mr. Derapino,
Here.
Chairman Walsh.
Here. Okay, we have no minutes for this meeting. We'll have them at next meeting. They're still being worked on. And we have no public hearings, so we'll go right to privilege of the floor. So anyone wishing to be heard regarding any planning and zoning matters in the Town of Niskayuna, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and we'll glad to listen to what you have to say.
Tim Serantonio, 2509 Antonia Drive. Hello again, Planning Board. I am here to voice my support of the resolution outlined in tonight's vote that would deny sketch plan approval for 1380 Van Antwerp Road development. It's been several weeks of intensive work by the CAC, Tree Council, town planners, town attorney, and the Planning Board itself to come to this proposed conclusion. It has not been an easy or enjoyable process and one that has not come lightly, I imagine. Yet the decision to deny this specific circumstance is one that gets to the very soul of who we are now and who we want to be as a community. After reviewing the last Planning Board meeting's recorded session, reviewing the submissions and notes on both sides, as well as some soul searching on my own, I have come to a simple conclusion on what this decision represents. It comes down to perspective. I find it telling that the photo submissions by the developer's handpicked consultant regarding the historical nature of the house were done at a bird's eye view. I find it telling that the developer's legal counsel made reference to the only viewpoint mattering to the discussion being the one found inside the house itself, and not from looking at the property from the outside. I find it most telling that the stated motivation of the project is economic gain for the developer. And of course, all these viewpoints make sense from their perspective, right? They didn't purchase the land to do anything other than make a profit off of it. It isn't being used to make a park or add any character to our community or anything like that. They're being very upfront about that to build more houses into an area they themselves have indicated is more increasingly developed. And I recognize and respect the work that has gone into preparing this perspective and have respect for the people that developer has economically compensated. But this is not one of those developments that they'll likely be putting on their website to help promote their work in the community. That's not the only perspective here. As the Planning Board has approved clearly and efficiently and effectively, it is not simply a rubber stamp for whatever any developer demands. It's taking the perspective that the individual pieces also matter to the larger whole. It isn't that development inherently is bad. I've witnessed exciting plans for food trucks, salons, and expansions of residential homes in the few meetings that I've had the pleasure of attending. I've also witnessed the Planning Board treat the son-in-law of the developer in question with not only the utmost respect and fairness, but also approve another project without a hint of being arbitrary or capricious. In my day job, I help oversee a technological ecosystem that is designed for nonprofits, foundations, and educational institutions. We serve 30,000 mission-driven organizations that have helped raise over $10 billion for causes around the world. A large amount of these organizations are right here in the capital region, and I've been able to procure sponsorship for the upcoming Niska Day celebration for several years in a row for my Chicago-based company. We believe in the power of communities. The reason I bring this up is that a large part of my job is making sure that individual technologies that do not overtake the larger story being told by our ecosystem. Nonprofits struggle with a lot of different technology, and much of it conflicts and hurts their goals of helping people. It's a job I take very seriously because one mistake in structure could have a catastrophic impact for years to come. That is the same job of the Planning Board right here in Niskayuna. Your perspective is one that needs to look to the past, present, and future. Your perspective is bigger than the individual profit to be gained on a few parcels of land. It is one that must defend the very character of what it means to be a citizen of Niskayuna. When I read through the arguments in favor of this development, I've seen the goalposts shift in order to get what has been demanded, coupled with a healthy dose of whataboutism on irrelevant properties and sword rattling intended to extract the intended result. The reality is that this is to be expected, and that's due to their perspective. It's difficult to see the forest for the trees when you're constantly cutting them down. Our perspective is one that is loftier than mere profit. It is one found in our town's master plan and has the grandest vision of community in mind. Over 30 Niskayuna citizens, many here tonight, have the perspective that the current iteration of the Van Antwerp property represents a welcoming beacon for families like my own that want to make their longtime home in Niskayuna. I am thrilled that this conversation has even occurred because it has made me appreciate my neighborhood, its character, its history, its environment, and the people who inhabit it so much more. Denying this sketch plan will ensure we stay a community that I will be proud to call my home for decades to come. The reasons outlined by numerous entities whose job is to answer the people of Niskayuna and not to the people who are paid for their perspective are clear, concise, fair, and varied. No matter the outcome of tonight may be, I thank you for your hard work. Thank you for hearing my perspective on this important matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daryl Bright, 1420 Van Antwerp Road. I want to thank you all for your service to our community, and I want to voice my support for the denial of the sketch plan of application for the 3-lot subdivision at 1380 Van Antwerp Road. I think that there's been a lot of people that have spoken very well and much better than I do about the negative impacts of this subdivision, and I hope that that you know that we do appreciate all your thoughtful consideration on all these matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi. Adam Reuter, 2505 McGovern Drive. I don't know that I could say it quite as eloquently as Tim did earlier, but I also just want to thank the planning board for their and the Conservation Advisory Council and the Tree Council for their really thoughtful consideration of this matter around 1380 Van Antwerp Road. I know that there are a lot of really tricky issues that have been brought up in this discussion, and I appreciate that you've really tried to get input from a lot of different angles and a lot of different stakeholders in this process. I agree with the denial of this sketch plan. I think that that would be a fitting way to see this, having reviewed all of the discussions and all of the different versions of the sketch plan and the various evidence that has been put forward. I think a denial will preserve the nature of this this neighborhood and really preserve this gateway to the neighborhood going back on Hilltop and McGovern Drives. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. How are you tonight?
Great, thank you.
My name is Chuck Petrowski. I'm at 1336 Stanley Lane here in Niskayuna. And I too would like to reiterate my thankfulness for your time and service, not only on this issue, but on the issues I've been here before in the past and the ones we follow at home. I would like to also speak out for the approval to deny the sketch plan, as we've discussed earlier in the past about this major minor subdivision in the Woodcrest neighborhood. And to be clear, I understand that there's some questions around the historical nature, and I know that folks have looked at it. But my background, my academic training, and my profession, I am a historian, and I live in the neighborhood. So to me, it is historical. To me, it tells a story. To me, it tells everyone who passes by Van Antwerp, who should be going 35 miles an hour, not 55 miles an hour, that it's a historic Finally, I'd like you to keep in mind when you vote, again, the character of the neighborhood, the trees, the history, and the quality of planning that's already happened there to make it such a unique spot. But also 3 other items, which I spoke to a couple weeks ago: integrity, trust, and respect of the people in that community. So when you do vote on this proposal, please think of those. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca Holmes, 1379 Van Antwerp. So let's address the new plan, which involves relocating the carriage house. My opinion is that this will not make this project acceptable, as there would be an entirely new set of impacts that would be created, such as, number 1, the new location is about 4 feet lower in elevation and would require a new foundation, probably 4 feet of exposed poured concrete at the rear, which would be a visible eyesore to McGovern Drive. Number 2, a huge amount of fill material would have to be brought in to form the driveway connecting to the new location and to fill in the foundation. Number 3, the original argument about how the removal of the impermeable footprint of the carriage house would lessen the impact of building 2 new impermeable houses is no longer valid. Number 4, the density of development would be increased yet again, thus heightening a concern from the CAC about the impact increasing the, quote, use and intensity of use of the land. Number 5, the carriage house would suffer a loss of integrity, and we have spoken at length about integrity. Number 6, there would be a huge increase in stormwater at the new location for the carriage house, and it would not be mitigated by the newly proposed second rain garden because, as we know, water does not flow uphill. That water would have to go downhill and then uphill. Doesn't work. And the new rain garden won't effectively mitigate the stormwater from the 3 new houses whose properties were clear-cut because, again, water doesn't run uphill. As an aside, I've looked at the drainage study. The map was missing from the online portion of the agenda, but I do have some technical questions about that study. It's more than I can get into right now. Number 7, the map indicates that the stormwater from the newly relocated carriage house would be collected via troughs, stone drip edge, regrading, drainage stones, swales, and stone trenches with an underdrain, all within a drainage easement behind the carriage house. The disturbance involved with just these drainage facilities would total roughly 3,000 square feet. With all that disturbance, I ask you, do you really think that the black walnut tree behind the relocated carriage house within the drainage easement will survive? How about the one to the east of that location with disturbance within 10 feet of its trunk? Do you really think that the size of these trees' canopies are accurately represented on this map in front of you? I can assure you with 100% certainty that the canopies are much larger than what is depicted on this map. We need to consider the Tree Council's recommendation that the areas of non-disturbance extend to the edges of the tree canopies to maximize their odds of surviving construction at all. And that is not indicated on the map. For all this talk about the applicants wanting to preserve trees, I still fail to understand why the first 3 lots were clear-cut as they were, and why we have a plan in front of us that will involve so much disturbance and the loss of so many more trees. Let's also revisit this issue of age of the structures relative to modifications over nearly 200 years, and whether it is significant because it was built in 1826 or because it is older than 50 years or because yet another consultant has classified it as a, quote, 1920s era suburban estate. My opinion is that one of the things that makes this place so great is that it has been livable for nearly 200 years. When these structures were built, there was no indoor plumbing and no electricity. I've been told by more than one person that this property was the first in the entire Schenectady area to get electric lights. And as indoor plumbing became commonplace, bathrooms were obviously added. And why not? Why not make the structures more livable as modern conveniences evolve? When I moved in, I couldn't get homeowners insurance because of the knob and tube wiring. So I had to upgrade the wiring if I wanted insurance. And in modern times, insurance is a necessity, as is electricity and indoor plumbing. Although modifications have occurred over time, it adds even more character and tells a deeper story, not only a snapshot about life in 1826, but also about how our lives have evolved since. Although the house has a kitchen now with a functioning refrigerator, the original root cellar still exists in the basement. Although the house has gas heat now, one can see where coal was stored in the basement maybe 100 years ago. Although the first floor has more modern-styled narrow-board oak floors, maybe 100 years old, the original wide plank flooring is still there under the oak, and you can see it if you know where to look. And I'm told it's hickory. When I removed the bathroom ceiling to repair a plumbing leak, I discovered a dumbwaiter. And adjacent to the carriage house is an original foundation for a barn that previously existed. A letter in my possession talks about taking that down that barn. It's a letter from, it was written in, I think, 1938 by one of the former owners. And it was a sad turn of events to have to remove the barn, but it was necessary because, as the letter states, quote, "The barn was in ill repair and my pocketbook was not up to the task." Yes, the property has evolved over time, as has been necessary. But so many of the wonderful original details still exist, and if you could give me 2 more hours, I could list 100 more. Even a renovation done in the 1920s is nearly 100 years old in 2019, and it's historic at this point. And I promise you, if that property existed exactly as it did in 1826, no one would be living there, because we can't live without electricity, indoor plumbing. And in 2019, we can't live without the internet. Case law from other communities, some decades old, doesn't bear on what the town of Niskayuna's laws say in 2019. The quote suburban lawn that the applicant's attorney keeps mentioning is out of context with the massive trees and gardens and other foliage on the property. The development of homes around what's left of the original homestead makes that last remaining 1.7 acres even more special, not less special. Historic structures and the properties they sit on are finite resources and they can't be replaced. And if we have any hope of upholding our current laws going forward, we must enforce them today and set the right precedent. Thank you.
Thank you. Privilege of the floor is still open.
Good evening, Luigi Palesci with ABD Engineers. Wasn't sure if this is the appropriate time to speak or if I'll have a chance to present the updated subdivision plan under the new business under the item for 1380. Will I have the opportunity to do so, or should I do it
You
now?
probably should do it now.
Okay. Thank you. So just want to go over a few changes since the last time we were here. We agreed to moving the carriage garage onto the existing property, 1380 Van Antwerp Road. The rear setback line on the previous subdivision plan was incorrect. We had shown it as 20 feet, being that it was a corner lot, but we did have to move the garage so that it's now more than 25 feet as what's required for the rear setback of that lot. We showed grading of this new relocated garage. Yes, it does sit lower in elevation in the back of the yard, and we've proposed a grading plan. The foundation will not be 4 feet of exposed foundation. Yes, fill will be needed, but there's enough room back there to have roughly 12 to 18 inches of exposed foundation from the proposed garage floor elevation to the bottom of the grading as shown on the grading plan. As we discussed before, there's a couple areas that the watershed drains to, one being at the intersection of Hilltop Road and Van Antwerp, the other being at the low point of McGovern Drive. As previously proposed on lot number 2, we had proposed a rain garden which takes care of that proposed house and driveway for lot number 2. I wasn't involved in the existing 3-lot subdivision where they clear-cutted trees and what have you. But what we did discuss is for us to analyze what those impacts would have been and how can we mitigate them on this 3-lot subdivision. And I went through that analysis and I updated the subdivision plan to show how we can mitigate the impacts that were done from that previous subdivision that I was not part of. We are proposing a rain garden on lot number 3. That rain garden would take the proposed house of lot number 3, a portion of the existing driveway that we're in the plan hoping to keep as part of this developed lot number 3. And all of that would drain into the rain garden that's proposed for lot number 3. We also included additional drainage around the newly relocated garage. We have a little bit of impervious surfaces, leading up to the relocated garage, but we've done our analysis, we've graded it, we're providing stormwater for the driveway leading up to the relocated garage. So as far as a stormwater perspective, it's in my report that we're doing the best we can on our site to mitigate what was done in the past where we can't do anything on those 3 lots because we don't own them. They've been sold. I don't think it's right to go to those homeowners and say, hey, I need to put a rain garden on your property now. That's not going to happen. So we did everything we can from a stormwater perspective to mitigate on our proposal that we have before you tonight. As far as the trees, I'll say it again. I met out there with the tree council. We flagged trees. I know just recently the proposed houses have been located out there with flagging to show you where the proposed houses could go and the trees that could be saved. So if you've been out to the site recently, you'll see, the proposal of those houses and the trees that can be saved. The amount of disturbance that we're proposing here, still less than an acre of disturbance, even with the newly added stormwater areas that we're showing on this plan. So as far as stormwater goes, I've been playing phone tag with Matt Yetto. That's kind of the last piece of my puzzle. But we finally got emailing back and forth, and his concern was the pressures on the existing water main. It's a 14-inch water main on Van Antwerp Road. And as you recall, that's where we're tying these 2 new lots off of. Being that it's the medium pressure zone, he told me there's about 50 pounds of pressure. I think engineering wise, we can accommodate the water laterals to these 2 homes from that system. We just have to upsize the water laterals a little bit larger so that we can get the pressures up to the second floor. So 50 pounds is what's there now. And I've calculated about 35 pounds to the second floor. And state minimum is 20 PSI. So we do exceed the minimum pressure that you would need for a single family home. So I could work out those details certainly with Matt Yetto and the town engineering department on as far as the water. Sewer, I think we talked about last time, there's an existing manhole and sewer system on Hilltop that these 2 will certainly have gravity systems to them. That's pretty much all the updates I have for you today. I think, Teresa, you want to?
Thanks a lot, Luigi. My name is Teresa Bakener. I'm here on behalf of Elena Lisi and Lou Lisi. I'm with the law firm of Whiteman, Osterman, and Hanna. You have 2 letters in the file from me, including one dated May 9th. I noted in your council's memo that's up on the website that he indicated that he didn't agree with the cases that we had previously provided because they were site plan cases. So what we did was we provided you a number of cases regarding subdivisions also equally applicable, demonstrating that where an applicant meets the requirements of the law, the planning board is constrained from acting in an arbitrary and capricious fashion in denying approval of a particular project. Now, I understand people's concerns from a land use perspective because people always have concerns when there's going to be a change in a town. Even though this is a very small change, the board is still constrained to review this in accordance with the law, in accordance with the requirements that are set forth for the planning board, and which everyone in the town benefits from. So we're still back at this situation where my client has offered a real benefit here, and that real benefit is putting a deed restriction on the property that would provide for the protection of the house and also the relocated carriage garage. This is a benefit. This is not something that the town can insist on or require. It's something that he can offer, he and Elena can offer as owners of the property. In the resolution, there's some substantially incorrect information. The house and property is not listed on the state or national registers of historic places. It has never been determined to be eligible. It is also not shown as eligible or listed on the state system CRIS, also referred to as CRIS. We provided the opinion of an expert archaeologist and historian from Hartgen Archaeological Associates, a very well-respected entity with respect to the value of the setting, which appears to be the primary concern of the board, because after all, the house is proposed to be preserved, and for the first time in its long life, being preserved with teeth, enforceable teeth. There's been no expert opinion by anyone offered that the suburban lawn surrounding a portion of the house is important to the historic context of this house. The next issue, which is constantly raised, is the comprehensive plan. Well, the comprehensive plan of 2013 has a list of historic properties in it. Guess what property's not in it? This one. It's there. We reproduced the list for you on pages 122 and 123. In addition to that, the description in the comprehensive plan is about the preservation of structures, and particular, an architectural review board, which does not currently exist, which was to be set up in order to look at proposed structures in proximity to historic structures to determine if they were consistent. Now, you'll notice in Adam Lucier's letter that he talks extensively about what's left of a historic nature of the property in terms of its context. As you know, it was a former farmhouse. The farm is long gone. The house itself was substantially changed in terms of its exterior appearance in the 1920s, which is why they identify it as a 1920s suburban style house. Perhaps that's the reason why it's not mentioned on the list of historic structures in the comprehensive plan from 2013. I really can't address that. Perhaps that's why it's never been evaluated and put on the state list for purposes of CRIS. Moving forward to seeker, I noticed tonight that you're proposing to deny this request without engaging in any sort of seeker analysis. Generally speaking, unless an action is type 2, one is required to comply with seeker before one denies an application. Here, your code clearly provides that this proposal, a minor subdivision of 3 lots, is a type 2 action under seeker. Under the state law, similarly, it would be an unlisted action. But it would be interesting to see what exactly the determination is that the planning board is making before it denies the application for a sketch plan approval. Bottom line, the application meets all the requirements that have been set forth in the zoning code and in the and in the subdivision regulations for a minor subdivision. Luigi has shown how, in fact, he has carefully designed this to deal with any on-site drainage issues. So although you indicate that there are drainage issues, there really are not any drainage issues. For your typical less than 1 acre of disturbance of subdivision, you would only have a soil erosion and sedimentation control plan. So in this case, the applicant has gone far beyond the typical requirements in order to deal with post-construction stormwater. We've also been told, even though you're an MS4, that we should contact DEC and find out how DEC would treat this application. Now, I discussed that with Mary Berry at DEC. Mary Berry is one of the stormwater coordinators there. Mary indicated that it is the MS4 that should be contacting DEC and getting any input. It is not the applicant's job to do that. It's really an engineering matter for the stormwater coordinator to check out. But regardless, this is not phase 2 of any other action here. All the surrounding properties have been built. This is a separate standalone application for 2 lots out of a single lot. There is nothing that would lead the department, particularly where, as here, we have driveways onto existing town roadways. We have connections to existing town utilities. There's no connection between this subdivision and any other subdivision of land surrounding it. So basically, you lay out things here that have already been addressed to the extent of our ability to address it, and which we've addressed far more than anyone ever has in the past, and that's the historic issue. We've proposed to relocate and preserve the garage. We've proposed to put a deed restriction on the house. Again, something that the town's not otherwise able to impose. We have also addressed the concerns raised by the trees, raised by the drainage, and we have met all the requirements of the subdivision. After weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of attempting to get a hold of Mr. Yetto, they were finally able to communicate, and the issue that has been hanging out there was clearly addressed by Luigi here tonight. There's no problem with the utilities. So the last issue here really is an issue that I was loath to bring up, but I really feel I must. And that is that Mr. Oster, in his current position on the planning board, really should be recusing himself from voting on this application. My client recently made me aware of a number of emails and communications with respect to another project that my client was working on that makes it very clear that Mr. Oster is not in a position to rule in a way that's independent with respect to an application by my client. So that's between Mr. Oster and his counsel, Mr. Hess, but I raise it for the record. So we're here. We're available to answer any questions that you have. And I believe that the decision that's been drafted for tonight really does not look at the information that's been provided. So we hope that as you further deliberate on this, that you'll see your way to recognizing the benefits proposed by this application, not only the benefits for my client, but also the benefits for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Caroline Moore, 1359 Lexington Avenue, Schenectady. Thank you for allowing me to be back here this evening. I appreciate it. I listened to what the attorney had to say. Again, I come from a much more emotional standpoint, but I truly believe that her client purchased the property, 1380 Van Antwerp Road, as an opportunity to make more money. He saw a big open space. Let's buy it. Let's subdivide it purely out of greed. And I was more than happy to come in, see that the proposal was being denied, and hearing so many people having to say the same. At what point do we not stop and see what's right and what's wrong? And what has happened to that property so far and the way it's been subdivided is wrong. And to further take it apart would be a travesty. Please do not destroy that property any further and turn Niskayuna into just another development. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Brennan, did you have anything for us tonight?
Dennis Brennan, 854 Barton Place, and I am the town historian. Thank you for inviting me here today. I should say, just by way of background, I received my PhD in American history in 2003 from SUNY Albany. My area of specialty was antebellum America, particularly abolitionism, so I am not an architectural historian, but I certainly have spent my, last 25 or 30 years anyway, studying history. I currently teach at Union College, and I've been there since January 2004, and I became Niskayuna historian in July of 2018. And I'm here to talk also about 1380 Van Antwerp and about some of the historical perspective or the historical realities behind it that I've been able to find. And if I repeat things that you've already heard, I apologize, but I just wanted to try to create a big picture. So about 1380 Van Antwerp, according to the 1985 Niskayuna Historical Resources Inventory, which I'll get into in a minute, it was built in 1864. But there is evidence that building was on that site, and a different building likely. I was on that site earlier. Guy Spear's Graphic History of Niskayuna Housing, 1650 to 2009, shows a house was built on that site in 1826. And at the time, it was only one of 26 houses in the town of Niskayuna. 1856 Fagan map, Lawrence Fagan, cartographer, did dozens of maps of the area, shows a building on that site as well. And then the more famous F.W. Beers, Frederick W. Beers map of 1866 shows two buildings at the site, the house and the carriage house, respectively labeled R. Van Vranken and G. Van Vranken. And again, Beers is a well-known map publisher, cartographer, who has hundreds, if not thousands, of maps in the at the Library of Congress. So about the 1985 Niskayuna Historic Resources Inventory. The inventory was undertaken in 1985, and this was not taken lightly. This was a tremendous amount of work that went into this. Town historian at the time was Coretta Hatley. The committee, the Niskayuna Historic Preservation Review Committee, included 19 individuals in the town and was assisted by the Schenectady County Planning Department. And it was taken in light of the 170th anniversary of the town. They claim they renewed interest in the historical aspects of the town and called for a need for comprehensive historical resources inventory. Through matching federal historic preservation funds administered through New York State's Certified Local Government Program, the town conducted that survey, and the Schenectady County Planning Department provided the technical assistance that they needed. So this was quite a major undertaking, and it eventually identified 74 houses, buildings, and one cemetery that were deserving designation as historical sites. Their goal was to provide an accurate community database for future planning decisions, such as we're making here today, to identify significant structures and recommend them for inclusion in the county's inventory, to encourage public awareness and appreciation for the town's history, and to develop a local historic preservation ordinance to designate and protect historic properties. I don't believe that ever happened, but it's certainly part of their planning. Detailed methodology about how they did this, how they decided which houses were worthy of being on this inventory list. Preliminary research, just looking at houses, driving by, windshield surveys as they call them, then collecting information through the town, information through the county, and compiling a list in accordance with New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation Building Inventory forms. And a summary of the significance of what they've done. They say the completed inventory provides a valuable planning tool for the town of Niskayuna, particularly in areas of imminent development. And also state that the early 20th century development is also an integral component of Niskayuna history. There are currently, I think, only 4 buildings on the National Historic Registry in Niskayuna. The Washington Jones Mansion over on Route 7, the railroad station, the Grange, the old Grange or the old school, and the Reformed Church in Niskayuna. Those are on the historic register, but I believe those are the only 4. In any case, it was a significant undertaking and quite a remarkable job they did in collecting not only images, but history about these various sites in Niskayuna. So with regard to 1380 Van Antwerp, the committee named the building the Van Vranken House because it was owned by one of the many Van Vrankens in the vicinity. And it also noted that the Van Vranken Farm became the Hilltop Road area of Niskayuna after the sale of some of the property to Charles Benedict in 1912 and Cornelius Simon in 1917. Simon eventually sold some of the property to Kramer LaPierre near late 1930s when Hilltop Road itself was created. And then it was the road was constructed in 1937. And in fact, Kramer LaPierre's house on Hilltop Road is also in this list of historic structures after it was built. It's particularly an example of the modern design of house building. It's quite a remarkable site in its own way. With regard to the Van Vranken family, which I think is important to consider, their connection with this property further enhances, I think, the historical distinction that is necessary to consider. The Van Vrankens were among the first settlers in the town in the late 17th and the early 18th century. The so-called Van Vranken settlement, which is referenced in a number of books about the history of Niskayuna, on, quote, Rosendale and Lock 7 roads was an important part of the early community. And in fact, one map from 1765, a map that was done for Clifton Park, I believe, or done of Clifton Park at the time, shows 14 houses in that settlement, and 6 of them were Van Vrankens. So there's a very important family in the area. In Howell and Munsell's History of Schenectady County from 1662 to 1886, under the history of Niskayuna, there's a small section on Niskayuna, on the history of Niskayuna and some of the prominent residents at the present time, it notes, quote, the Van Vrankens are numerous, 15 of them in one part of town, farmers. Their residences are known as the Van Vranken neighborhood. which is certainly visually apparent if you take a look at the 1866 Beers map. If you start down at Lock 7, number of Van Vrankens there, you move up Rosendale Road, there's Van Vrankens all along that road. You go up to Balltown Road and then connect to, or rather go to Union and then connect to Balltown Road up to Van Vranken, and Van Vranken, of course, across to River. It makes this sort of large, well, awkward-looking triangle. But all along that route are Van Vrankens, including the Van Vrankwins who lived at 1380 Van Antwerp Road. So, considering all this information and history, I believe that what remains of the Van Vranken farm, including the buildings and land, should be protected from further development. It is a significant historical and physical representation of our town's past, much of which has been hidden under development. And it's a past that would be undermined, contracted, and potentially subsumed before being overwhelmed and its historic value impaired rather than preserved. Without doubt, the historic character of Niskayuna has undergone growth, development, and change, and it will continue to do so. However, change must be tempered. Niskayuna will never again be what it was in 1809 or 1866 or 1920. But it will be poorer if it forgets or ignores how its past not only contributed to its present, but also to its future. Consequently, it's my opinion that this proposed subdivision would be detrimental to the character of an historic section of Niskayuna and would only further and unnecessarily damage the, quote, integral components of the current setting of 1380 Van Antwerp Road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we go forward with the agenda, I have a few questions for Ms. Bakner about the alleged request or the request to have Mr. Oster recuse himself. Is there any statutory basis that you're basing your request on?
Would you please come to the microphone, Teresa? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, generally in the ethics laws that are pertain in an individual and municipality, and I assume the town has one, there is a statement that you're to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Mr. Oster owns a house next to a 16-acre parcel, which is owned by my client, Mr. Lisi. As part of Mr. Lisi's construction of a single home on that property, Mr. Oster raised many concerns, required many meetings, really reached beyond his capacity as a planning board member, and required that the town address issues that really were outside the scope of a planning board members' concerns. So from our perspective, and you're the attorney for the board, Mr. Hess, from our perspective, under those circumstances, there would be appearance of impropriety should he act with respect to this application, given the nature of the circumstances that exist between him and my client.
Have I taken any action on
Wait.
other leasing properties?
Actually, Mr. Oster, I have a few more questions. Are you alleging that Mr. Oster has any financial interest in the
No,
outcome
we
of
are
this?
not. We're not.
Um,
Where he has a financial interest in his other property. He certainly does not have an interest in connection with the Van Vranken property that I am aware of.
Is there any pending litigation that I'm not aware of between the two parties?
There is, to the best of my knowledge, no pending litigation between the two parties.
So I attended meetings in the fall of this year that related to the property behind Mr. Oster's house. So I'm aware of that. Is there something new other than those facts which occurred more than 6 months ago that has changed Mr. Lisi's viewpoint as to this issue? So frankly, I'm wondering why at the 11th hour we're raising this issue.
it relates to those issues, and I had not seen the emails. I was not really substantially aware of that issue, so I couldn't bring it up before tonight.
You were at the meeting.
Yes, I was at the meeting, but Mr. Oster was not at the meeting. I wasn't aware of who the neighbors were who were complaining to the town at the time. My understanding was that we were there to deal with what was couched as a stormwater issue, Mr. Hess, and it was in that capacity that I was there. There was no planning board approval required for that project.
And to your knowledge, is the stormwater issue resolved now that a temporary certificate of occupancy has been issued for that property?
I would say stormwater issues would be resolved once an NOT was issued. I believe they were forced to file an NOI with respect to the property. I don't know if an NOT has been filed at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Have I taken any action on a leasing property since all this? Yes. Have I ever voted against a previous leasing property application? No.
So I think the record should reflect the fact that there was a project that Mr. Mahar was here at last week, which this board approved at a time when Mr. Oster was a sitting member of the board. But as to the issue of recusal, I want to do some research while we proceed with the agenda.
Okay, thank you. So privilege of the floor is still open. Give everybody last chance for a closed privilege of the floor. Anybody else wishing to be heard regarding any planning and zoning matters? No? Okay. Seeing no one, I'll close privilege of the floor and we'll move on the agenda. Next up is unfinished business. Resolution 2019-10, a resolution for site plan approval of a gas station signage at 1502 Balltown Road. Now, typically, we don't read the resolution. Was the thought we would read this one because it's reworked since last time? Okay, I think that's a good idea. So please read the resolution, Mr. Twitty.
One of the purposes of the meeting was to take action on an application for a site plan review. Whereas Lizzie Alloway of Station Glow LLC has made an application to the planning board for signage improvements to the mobile gas station at 1502 Balltown Road that include replacing the existing monument sign gas price signage with segmentable LED lights. And whereas the zoning classification of the property is CN, neighborhood commercial, and whereas the location and square footage of the site's existing monument sign received an area variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals on March 16, 1995, and whereas the planning board has previously reviewed the proposed monument sign upgrades are consistent with previous approvals and allowable within the area variances previously granted, and whereas this board has carefully reviewed the proposal and by this resolution does set forth its decision hereon, now therefore be it hereby resolved that this Planning Board and Zoning Commission finds that the site plan is modified by the Planning Board on April 29, 2019 to remove all promotional signage, meets the requirements of the zoning code, previous site plan approvals, and therefore does hereby grant final site plan approval for signage improvements to the monument sign at the mobile gas station at 1502 Balltown Road, subject to the following conditions. 1, the resolution shall be incorporated into any deed of sale for this property, and the conditions of the resolution shall be binding on the applicant, the owner, if different than the applicant, their successors, assigns, or transferees. 2, the proposed price signage on the monument sign shall be a static display of the price of gas only. 3, prior to beginning any of the above referenced site plan changes, the applicant is required to obtain a building permit from the Town of Niskayuna's Building Department.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Twitty. Do I have a motion on the resolution?
So moved.
Move Mr. Oster for passage and seconded by Mr. Khan. Any discussion at all?
Just very briefly, I'd like to thank Mr. Khan for initiating the discussion that led to the removal of the blaze signs, because I thought they were atrocious. Too much. Yeah.
No, I think this worked out fine. I appreciate that also. And it's a static display and it's in keeping with other approvals we've previously granted on other service stations. So it's consistent. So I can support this resolution. Any other comments? No? Please call the roll.
Ms. Shenfield?
Aye.
Ms. Gold?
Aye.
Mr. Khan?
Aye.
Mr. McPartlin?
Aye.
Mr. Oster?
Aye.
Mr. Garapino?
Aye.
Chairman Walsh?
Aye. Resolution passes. We'll move into new business. First resolution under new business is Resolution 2018-08, a resolution for denial of a sketch plan application for a 3-lot subdivision at 1380 Van Antwerp Road. Mr. Twitty?
One of the purposes of the meeting was to take action on an application for sketch plan approval. Whereas Lou and Elena Lisi, landowners, have made an application to the planning board for a 3-lot minor subdivision at 1380 Van Antwerp Road, as shown on a map entitled Subdivision Plans, Lands Now Formerly of Lisi, 1380 Van Antwerp Road, Town of Niskuna, County of Schenectady, State of New York, by ABD Engineers LLP, dated September 24, 2018, and last modified May 2, 2019. And whereas the zoning classification of the property is R1, low-density residential, and whereas this Planning Board and Zoning Commission has reviewed this proposal in the context of Chapter 189 of the Code of the Town of Niskuna for compliance with the preservation of natural and historic spots, conformity with the master plan, and downstream drainage, and finds that the current proposal does not adequately preserve an important historic spot, does not conform with the master plan's specific guidance on historic preservation, and requires clarification on the site disturbance and a downstream drainage analysis. Now therefore be it hereby resolved that the Planning Board and Zoning Commission does hereby deny sketch plan approval for the proposed 3-lot subdivision as shown on a map entitled Subdivision Plans, Lands Now Formerly Lisi, 1380 Van Antwerp Road, Town of Niskuna, County of Schenectady, State of New York, by ABD Engineers LLP, dated September 24, 2018, and last modified May 2, 2019, with the following comments. 1. The Planning Board finds this is a historic structure that appears on historic maps and historic inventories within the Town of Niskuna and on the State Cultural Resource Inventory System. Under Section 189-21F, the Planning Board shall establish the preservation of historic spots. Any further submittals shall show alternatives that keep the historic nature of the property intact, including maintaining the location and integrity of the carriage house and maintaining significant trees, vegetation. 2. Under Section 189-15B, subdivision shall be in harmony with the master plan. The Planning Board finds that as the town approaches full build-out and development pressures increase, development shall be carefully managed to protect cultural assets. As a historical cultural asset and gateway to the surrounding neighborhood, any further submittal shall show alternatives with less or no impact to the integrity of the historic parcel. 3. The Conservation Advisory Council memo outlined concerns with the environmental impacts of the proposal. The Planning Department recommends the developer addresses each of those concerns prior to any resubmittal to the Planning Board. 4. This development is directly adjacent to 3 new lots that were recently disturbed and may be required by DEC to be considered a contiguous project. Any resubmittal to the Planning Board shall include documentation in writing from the DEC that this project does not qualify as contiguous development, or future submittals should make provisions to obtain permit coverage. 5. The Tree Council noted that these trees are distinct and valuable, and the CAC discussed the uniqueness of the flora. More alternatives should be explored to keep the maximum amount of trees and flora intact. 6. Section 189-20C of the subdivision code states that the subdivider's engineer shall also study the impact of each subdivision on the existing downstream drainage facilities outside the area of the subdivision. Any further submittal should document the existing downstream drainage to ensure the existing system is not overloaded.
Okay, sorry. Mr. McPartland, I have a motion.
I move for adoption of the resolution, and Mr. Chairman, I would like to just briefly summarize my reasoning. Sure. That's all right. And I'd like to start by just thanking everyone who's in attendance and who has been in attendance, and more importantly, those who have contributed to this discussion. And I feel as though all the stakeholders involved have done a fair bit of due diligence to ensure that we're approaching this with the correct amount of perspective and significance. So with that being said, I frame my feelings on this resolution primarily around a couple of the recommendations we received from the Conservation Advisory Council that deals with the character of the existing community and the potential for a significant negative impact on historical historic, archaeological, architectural, and aesthetic resources. With that being said, one of the guiding documents that I've used in my time on this board is the town's master plan, and I think it's very telling that the master plan actually expressly addresses this type of development. There's a section of the comprehensive plan entitled Redevelopment Concerns, in which it states that development in established neighborhoods, which can be attractive due to proximity to local businesses and town amenities, should be carefully managed. Recognizing that a key element of the town's residential character and overall appeal is a tendency toward development which harmonizes with the natural surroundings and existing cultural and historical identity of our community, I believe it is a local town responsibility, just as it is stated in the comprehensive plan, to protect this and other historical assets in the town. It seems as though there's a good basis for calling this parcel a historic and cultural asset. Some of the guidance that I've received that I think really frames that understanding for me is obviously the entry in Niskayuna Historic Preservation Review Committee survey, as well as the data point that is shown in the CRIS system of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historical Preservation, in which it is clearly identified as the Van Vranken home and has a unique site number. And I'd just like to close by saying that two of the guiding documents that I use in making this motion, being the comprehensive plan and the town code, both deal with historic preservation in no uncertain terms. The comprehensive plan states that every effort should be made to actively protect historic sites and properties. And the town code states that the planning board shall, wherever possible, establish the preservation of all natural features which add value to residential development in the community, such as historic spots and irreplaceable assets. So for those reasons, I move for adoption.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'd like to second. And when I do, I'd like to give everybody a little bit of information on my background. So I have a bachelor's degree in architecture from Syracuse University. I spent 14 years working at Mesick Cohen Wilson Baker Architects, who specializes in historic preservation. I have my own consulting firm that I started 6 years ago that focuses on that, and I work on the contracting side. I've worked on buildings by Thomas Jefferson, Philip Hooker, H.H. Richardson, and Frank Lloyd Wright, not to mention many, many other local buildings around here. I also wrote the comprehensive plan with fellow colleague, Mr. Oster, and myself and Mr. Strayer were two people that were very adamant about adding a historic preservation section. So even though some of those goals are in motion and things that we are working on, they are goals. And we're trying to strengthen some of those aspects of creating an architectural resource board and taking a look at inventorying more historical properties. A clarification on the National Register's current listing on Chris. I believe it's currently undetermined, which means it hasn't been denied, and I don't think it's been actually applied for. So that's my understanding of what the current property is on the Chris listing. The comp plan does not list this house specifically. It only lists a handful, but the comprehensive plan is a guideline. We could have added 50 pages if we wanted to. We did use this document that the town has with the county. It's very extensive, almost 80 properties. We did review it. It is in the town archives, so it's easily accessible. So there's been information on this house that was in there. We didn't specifically list it. The analogy that I would make is that there are probably 40 to 50 Paul Schaefer homes in Niskayuna, and I didn't list every single one of them. I currently am, and that's my new pet project. But the historic structures and sites include everything on the property. When things are moved or things are removed, it begins to compromise what's there. That includes foundations, vegetation, and there was a good observation made about perspective. And although you can look at an aerial map and you can stand on the front porch and look out at the property, as you approach it from Van Antwerp, north and south, putting another house on the corner will severely restrict the perspective of that house. I think there's been a lot of good work done towards the drainage plan, but I'm still not convinced that it's going to be anything that's going to improve the dynamics of that neighborhood and currently how it flows north on Van Antwerp. And given my background, I can understand that information. The Harkin letter to me was taking a cursory walkthrough of the building and the carriage house, the house and the carriage house. And the two of them together basically had a one-page letter and created a period of significance, making it in the 1920s. The information that our town historian brought to us here was pretty extensive. It's all readily available. So I questioned how much of this report, was it just a walkthrough? Was a comprehensive structural analysis done? Was a historic structures report done? There's many, many, many levels of a report that you can do. It just seems to me that picking something out of the 1920s as a period of significance doesn't really paint the whole picture of what the entire history of that house is, dating from the 1860s to the current day. I just was wondering if Harkin was aware if the 1985 survey was available and what other research. You don't have to answer that question, but I guess the question, or to answer your question, is there an expert on the panel? I think I'm pretty qualified. So if it means that I have to go through the house at some point, we do site visits. In fact, we have other applicants here that the board has met with. We try to extend walkthroughs with our councils. And if that needs to happen at some point, I'm more than happy to make myself available to do that.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and second.
Mr. Chairman, before we call, I'd like to address the issue of recusal. So first, I'd like to say that I would have appreciated a heads up as to this issue instead of being sandbagged at the meeting. I haven't seen the emails that Ms. Bakner referred to, so I can't speak as to that issue, but I will note they could have been provided to me prior to this time. I do have a working relationship with Mr. Lisi as another attorney who does real property. He has my telephone number and my email address, so those are steps that could have been taken before tonight. You may have noticed me up here nervously on my phone looking through our town code to see what we have on this issue. I couldn't find the language that Ms. Bakner referred to as to the appearance of impropriety, but admittedly, I'm not that great on the phone. What I will tell you in the context of the town ethics code, I am well aware of the conflict of interest that relates to our ethics code. And almost all of those address a financial interest that should have been disclosed. And I'm not aware of that in this specific question, in this specific instance. I was at the meeting in the fall that the drainage issue that affected Mr. Oster's house. So I was at that meeting. I'm not aware of anything that took place then that would rise to the level of recusal. So I don't think this raises to that level. But frankly, I am concerned about protecting the record. I don't like to shoot from the hip on an issue where I'm researching on my phone. So my proposal is that when we call the roll, Mr. Twitty, I would like you to call Mr. Oster last, provided that we have four affirmative votes on the motion. I'd like Mr. Oster to abstain, not recuse.
I was just going to make a comment that based upon the analysis by Mr. Hess, at least the thumbnail one, I think I do not believe there's any conflict at all. In fact, I voted for multiple projects brought by this developer on other occasions since the time that the development has been gone behind my house. I actually think the accusation is probably one of the most interesting comments I've received in the 10 years I've been on the planning board. Nevertheless, I do not want to make myself an issue, and I will refrain from to avoid having myself be an issue on this, which again, I find to be just an outrageous accusation.
And again, my position is that without opining on the facts at all, I believe that's the best way to protect the record. So Mr. Twitty, if you could call the roll.
I
Yeah.
have some comments.
Sorry.
And by the way, the New York State standard is to avoid even the appearance of an impropriety. There doesn't have to be an actual conflict. It's the appearance that the state goes by. I'm not sure if it's in the town code. I just don't know. Or if it's in the oath of office itself. But regardless, I've thought a lot about this. I didn't actually think I was going to be voting on it, but I had done some research back in March. And one of the things I was concerned about was, well, if this had made either the state or the federal registry, what did that mean? Because it's been a long time since I'd looked at that particular information. So I pulled up the state site, and it has an explanation of what the registers are, and then it has a section of what are the results of listing. 1, registered properties and properties determined eligible for the registers receive a measure of protection from the effects of federal and/or state agency-sponsored, licensed, or assisted projects through a notice review and consultation process. 2, owners of depreciable certified historic properties may take a 20% federal income tax credit for the cost of substantial rehabilitation as provided for under the Tax Reform Act of 1986. 3, municipal and not-for-profit owners of listed historic properties may apply for matching state historic preservation grants. It then continues, there are no restrictions placed on private owners of registered properties. Private property owners may sell, alter, or dispose of their property as they wish. That put me in a tough spot, folks. I've been listening to all the neighbors and some other interested parties. I was part of the comprehensive plan committee that wrote the last comprehensive plan. Indeed, I'd served on the previous 2 as well. But clearly, that legislation was meant to be a carrot, not a stick. We're using it as a stick. We're using our current language as a stick. I'm not sure that's justified. You know, I value property rights, particularly my own, but therefore I must value everybody else's. And the current owner's property rights are not being addressed. I will note the previous property owners could have put a deed restriction on, and we wouldn't be here discussing this matter at all. But they didn't. New owner is willing to put a restriction on, and that's something that does speak to the future. But I'm finding I'm just not comfortable voting for the denial. So I will not be voting that way.
Well,
And I will also note, the town has actively protected just a couple properties, the train station and the Grange. And the thinking behind the town's effort on both of those was that they were community properties. They were properties that were open and used by the community. They were part of the everyday fabric of life for the town. You can't say that about private farm that then became a private suburban home. So I think we're on somewhat shaky ground, or at least I'm not comfortable enough with this.
Go ahead, Mr. Khan.
I would like to make a comment. Our town code, the town comprehensive plan, has been quoted before, has made clear that this board represents a sensible and final, to some extent, opportunity to not further diminish the nature of our historical sites. Whether it's registered as a data point on Chris, the fact that it exists as an historical site, it's known as a historical site, it is understood as being that, and the land on which it sits, has always been my contention, should be part of that historical site also. So I'm very comfortable actually voting for this resolution. In fact, what I'm thinking of proposing, and I'm still going to go forward, is to require all developers coming forward to give an assessment of the historical nature of the property they're trying to develop. Because I'll go on the record here and say that I am actually unhappy with my previous decision to even allow the original subdivision that was made on that property. If I were more aware of the historical nature of that Lot 1 property, I can safely say I would not have supported that subdivision. So with that being said, I just wanted to at least get my comments on the record that I view Lot 1, the lot that's under consider that wants to be subdivided, and everything that's on it as being part of the historical nature of Niskayuna, as has been established in the Niskayuna record. And this is the planning board in town of Niskayuna, and I'll vote as a resident member of the planning board in town of Niskayuna. And we can apply state and federal and other kinds of criteria, but I'm clear on what the Niskayuna criteria is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before we call the roll?
And I also wanted to, echo the same sentiments that some of my fellow board members have about the historical site and in its current capacity, before any sort of, minor subdivision, that site itself, I definitely see as a historic site without any subdivision.
Okay. I'll give my comments when I vote, please. Please call the roll.
Ms. Shenfield,
Aye.
Ms. Gold,
No.
Mr. Khan,
Aye.
Mr. McPartlin,
Aye.
Mr. DiRapino,
Aye.
Chairman Walsh.
I'm going to vote aye, but I'd just like to comment that, I'm basing my vote on the guidance that I received from the town attorney as it relates to the subdivision of land, specifically Chapter 189, 15B, about subdivision shall conform to the official map of the town and shall be in harmony with the master plan. I agree with Mr. DiRapino that the listing in the comprehensive plan was just a sampling. In fact, the words say the following is a collection. It doesn't say that it's all-inclusive collection of all historic properties in the town. So I believe based on the guidance and I believe the whole site as a whole does have some historic value, and that's why I'm voting that way. But I'd also like to add that the engineering issues that are identified in the resolution, my experience, I'm losing track there, 21 years on the board, is that we can always work through engineering, and we can, I can put my faith in the engineer applicant and also in the town, either a town designated engineer or the overview that's performed by the town itself to be able to come through the engineering issues. So it's strictly for me, the historic value of the property. And I'd also like to echo what Mr. Khan said when we came through the subdivision before. It was done in such a way that the intent was to preserve Lot 1. I failed to recognize that someday it may be coming back to us, which did a disservice to the public. Everybody had to come out many times to speak about that, but also did a disservice to the applicant because the applicant invested funds to be able to pursue this subdivision. So I wish I did a better job, and I've also learned a lesson there, and we'll try to strive going forward to make sure it's clear anytime we do some subdivision, just like Mr. Khan stated. So I vote yes for the resolution.
Mr. Oster.
Abstain.
Mr. Oster abstains. So the resolution passes, a vote of 5 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstention. Resolution's passed. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you everybody for their patience. I know that was a long discussion and long privilege of the floor. We'll move on. Another resolution tonight we have is Resolution 2019-13, a resolution for site plan approval of an outdoor refrigeration unit at 1084 Balltown Road.
One of the purposes of the meeting was to take action on a site plan application. Whereas David Fink has made an application to the Planning Board and Zoning Commission on behalf of the Schenectady Curling Club for a site plan review of a replacement of the club's outdoor refrigeration system and the installation of a 180 square foot concrete pad and fence enclosure. And whereas a site plan is shown in the plan entitled Site Plan Lands of the Schenectady Curling Club, prepared by Gilbert Van Gilder P. LLC, dated in the month of April, and whereas the zoning classification of the property is R1, low density residential, and whereas the planning board has referred this application to the town's engineering department, and the department does not object to the proposed plans, and whereas this board has carefully reviewed the proposal, and by this resolution does set forth its decision hereon, Now therefore be it hereby resolved that the Planning Board and Zoning Commission does hereby grant final site plan approval of an outdoor refrigeration system, including a 180 square foot concrete pad and fence enclosure.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion? Motion for approval by Mr. Diarpino. Have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Gold. One thing, I'll support this resolution. I just think we need to add another condition. If you look at the previous resolution we had regarding the signage at Balltown Road, we stated that prior to beginning any of the above referenced site plan changes, the applicant is required to obtain a building permit from the town of Niskuna's building department. I think we should be consistent with all resolutions if we're going to have that in there. So I propose we just add that condition to this resolution, basically notifying that the applicant needs to get a building permit.
Oh, Kevin, can we include in that amendment that the second whereas clause would be dated April 30th, 2019?
Second whereas.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the submittal was dated April 30th. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
I missed it, yeah. Oh, okay, here we go. April 30th. Okay. All right, maybe we can just do a show of hands, because I think that's pretty benign, that motion. Everybody show of hands that we're okay with the modification of the resolution. That's unanimous. All right. So do I have a motion on the resolution as modified? Yes.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Diarpino, and again, seconded by Mr. McPartlin. Looks good. I mean, it's going to be improvement. It's talking about the summary provided by the applicant, 1952. Got some old equipment there. I took a look today, and not only will it be energy efficient, hopefully extend the lifetime of the current curling club, but also clean up the property because it looks a little rough around the side there where that historic equipment is located. So seems like to me it's all in the good and positive work here. So
So typically we review sort of outdoor HVAC equipment to make sure that they're, either properly screened or not excessively noisy. I think that they mentioned in here that it would be less noisy. But I don't know if you just want to.
yeah, Mr. Fink, right? Mr. Fink representing the curling club. That was one of the comments I had, but after looking at it, I thought that, Jesus, just from looking at it, it seemed like the new one would probably be quieter than what you had there.
Actually, it is. What's out there now, and you see in the pictures, is a water tower. The current compressor system is water cooled, but there's a big fan unit on there. An old style, it's decades old. So the new one is all new air cooled cooling equipment. It's actually mounted so it blows vertically instead of horizontally now. So we anticipate it'll be quieter, more state-of-the-art equipment. So
Yeah, I agree. And
we did anticipate it being noisier.
there's no residence right nearby. I mean, the fire department's across the street. There's like a gully there. So there's,
The golf course on either side of it.
yeah,
That
so I think
property was purchased from Mohawk.
should be good. Anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Fink?
Not at all.
Okay.
Open invitation to try curling
Say
next
yes.
fall.
This might promote more membership.
If the weather stays the way it is, you won't need the refrigeration unit.
I know it. We started curling on the Mohawk River.
All right, any other comments or questions for the applicant?
I can't believe you're using the same refrigeration equipment you were using when I was a kid visiting there.
I know it.
It's amazing.
It is. But it's tired. It's past due.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Please call the roll.
Ms. Shenfield,
Aye.
Ms. Gold,
Aye.
Mr. Khan,
Aye.
Mr. McPartlin,
Aye.
Mr. Oster,
Aye.
Mr. Diarpino,
Aye.
Chairman Walsh.
Aye, resolution passes, and thanks for your patience tonight.
Thank you.
Busy night. All right, we'll get to discussion items. First up being 859 Pierce Road, two-lot subdivision for sketch plan application. And let's see, Mr. Diarpino, I believe, has got these.
So do you want to come up?
Came back from Florida too soon.
Okay.
You're out west. Out west.
Phoenix, yeah, we did come back. Yeah, Judy Knight, 859 Pierce Road.
Hans Knight.
And this is a two-lot subdivision. It's a division of our 2-acre, well, almost a hair smaller than that, of our 2-acre lot that we have lived in a home there for, 28 years now.
And we would like to be able to subdivide so that we can build a home for ourselves. We're aging faster than I want to even admit. And we're finding it difficult to continue to care for the 2 acres. We love our area, we love our neighborhood. And so we want to be able to subdivide and be able to build and continue to live on our land.
Okay. I just want to point out to the board, if you look at your other packet agenda statement for 738 Pierce Road, that's the attached is the, which helps give a visual of the lots that we're talking about at, where is it? 859.
Now, our neighbors on each side, as well as across the street and the next to the one across the street, have all done subdivisions, not identical, but in keeping with what we're asking.
So we walked the property in December of last year and took a look at some other neighboring properties from the streetscape, Jeff and myself and the owners, and got a pretty good lay of the land of what's there. There are a couple properties set back. This is a unique configuration with Huntington Drive being a large curve, and then the other road off of, I forget what it is, off of Pierce, but it jettisons out at an angle, making these very odd lot configurations. So there was a precedent for other flag-shaped lots in the area, which we took a look at, the 2 adjacent ones to the north and south. And then I think the way we had left it was we felt we would like to give them the opportunity to go to the zoning board to pursue the subdivision.
Yeah. Taking a look at, I guess call this an aerial, or you can see, was this 834, looks like a pretty large piece of land there, huh? That something may happen in the future. I'm assuming that's only one home on 834, it looks like, huh? In the same, we got 862 and 868. Were those, is that something that we approved in recent times?
Yeah, that would be, well, actually, the 862, I don't know if you have that old agenda statement. I can't remember what the date of that one is, but the 834 was maybe 2016.
Yeah.
I think I'm just ballparking, but the 862 was maybe 2010.
Yeah, I mean, I was probably here, I just don't remember, that's all. But to Mr. DiArpino's point, there's, and to your point, there's been other similar subdivisions of property with keyhole lots or flag lots being formed there. My biggest concern, is that, A, we were inconsistent, and I worry about, being consistent here, but then this being, looked at, hey, if you did it here, how about over here in town? And it's one of the things we're trying to discourage is the flag lots. So that's, that's the tough thing, But you look at 875, 879, 865, I recall that application. And obviously, those variances were granted. And I'm assuming there must have been variances for 845 for frontage also. There must have been granted. So I don't want to treat this applicant any different and not give them the same opportunity that we've given the other ones, is my view, So.
Just one comment I guess I'll make is from my experience on the zoning board, it may seem like a difficult thing to do or maybe counterintuitive, but if you haven't already, I would encourage you to speak with your neighbors about your plans for development.
Well, many of our neighbors know, they've known us for years.
Oh, good.
And, when they were doing their subdivisions, we were, I said, well, at some point we're gonna have to, because we just, if we're gonna stay there, because we can't keep it up. And, we're pretty picky about how we like to keep things. And, I would hate to have to just let it go to be able to remain.
Okay.
So they're pretty much aware of it.
Good.
Yeah, they don't know that we came tonight, but we've talked with them many times.
You're planning on selling the other home and building a new home for yourself in the rear if this is approved?
That's the plan,
Right.
yes.
So hopefully they
Something-
maintain the property, your expectations wherever you sell it, huh?
Yeah, we'd like to.
I know.
But,
You're gonna
there's a lot
drive
of
by it
steps
every
to go
day.
through that, but that's what we're.
I know, that's always a challenge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's our plan, because we need something on one level, and something that's more workable and, I had my mom with me for a while and I saw what, somebody who's older than it needs for wheelchairs and walkers and whatnot. And, so we built with all that in mind.
Yeah, ranches are cool. I got a ranch, so.
David, did we talk about if we can make it larger than 20 feet? Or is that did you guys look at that? I don't remember.
So the one side of the property that would be where the current driveway is, there's some large trees that are there. And we had talked about on the 865 side of the property, there's another driveway that goes all the way down to get to that house way in the back that has a pond.
Yeah.
And the option of a shared driveway, I think, had been breached with the owners previously. It wasn't.
We had asked him,
and that was
would
off
he,
its-
would he ever consider,
Right.
that? He said no.
And then in order to get a driveway in with the grade and the current structures that were there, it can't be squeezed in along 865. There's just not enough setback to get from the road all the way to the back. So moving it to the 847 side of the property would make sense. It's clearer. There's only a couple trees there, but nothing that can't be worked around.
Yeah,
And
I
I
don't
believe on 845, there's that's the stone house, correct?
I believe so. The numbers are so crazy.
Right.
I know
But
by
then
their
there's-
names.
Yeah, but there's
Yeah.
a stone house, but it also has a smaller building next to it, or correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a little
Paul's
garage
house.
or something.
Paul's house?
It's
Yeah, it's Paul's.
Paul's
Yeah,
house.
Paul's
Well,
house,
it
yeah.
used to
Yeah.
be his.
Well, it's not, he.
Oh, he doesn't
Paul
live
sold
there
it.
anymore?
No, he sold that a few years ago. Well, there's an attached garage.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's an outbuilding over there too, and this driveway would not encroach upon those buildings
Oh, no.
along that property line.
No, not it.
I get that the front lot needs space, but usually when we look at these, we try to make the
Minimize the
frontage
request.
a little bit more fair.
Mhm.
Maybe that doesn't make the most sense in this one, but if we're looking at it for sketch plan, the reason it's on here is we haven't seen it forever and we need to call for sketch plan. Would be are we okay with the 20 feet or do we want to see if it can go to 40 or is that going to negatively impact the other one? Usually we have the discussion of,
200?
can we make it bigger than 20 feet?
I'm not okay with the 20 feet.
Right? It's too small.
It's like the extreme example of what we're trying to prevent.
Yeah.
We just picked 20 feet because one of the times we were talking to somebody in the town, they said 20 feet. It doesn't have to be. And in fact, I think last time we were here,
Sides, I think the side setback. is
well,
what they were
Paul's is
interpreting.
only 15 feet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the 20 feet
Yeah.
of frontage. Yeah.
So,
Next
yeah, other ones are 15 feet. That's the smallest one was Paul's, was 15 feet. But if you wanted more off the front, we could do that. What I would like to be able to do is whoever, when we sell our house and somebody purchases it, the one thing that I think somebody might want to do is to be able to put a 2-car attached garage on. And I'd like to have that, even if it came off the street wider, that the one line would, allow so that a 2-car garage could be joined to the house at some point. We've never done that. We've never had the money to be able to do that. But that's something I think that a family who would purchase this home might want to do in the future. And I think it would be very nice, be very pleasant for the neighborhood because the house would look even nicer. So, if you wanted more than the 20 feet, we could do that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So
where
your
the-
frontage is labeled 150. If you go then less than 100 on the one side, then you need 2 variances. But I think, my recommendation would be that you at least have 50 feet. And then I would leave it up to the board if they'd want to see more.
So you'd lay out just just take a garage, say 24 feet or something like that and be a little bit conservative. And then the side yard setback, add that on, right? And then see what's left. That would be the maximum that you could go, right?
Yeah.
And also, how important do we think it is to look at existing trees and buffering between properties and try and minimize the amount of disruption.
Yeah, I definitely
there.
think we should look at that.
Yeah, there's a row of trees.
Line,
Yeah.
where we've designed this so that the tree line that does exist, it's almost as if we had two lots, I gotta be honest with you. And we call them the backyard and the way far back because there's a tree line right there. And we wanted to keep that tree line so that there's privacy for both, us
Well,
building back
I
there.
think they're talking about the two big trees on the side of the lot next to Paul's, the stone house.
No, it's a whole property.
I don't know if that,
Well,
Yeah.
we
Like-
wanted to save those trees too,
Yeah,
the oak and the
I
hickory.
mean, we're not looking at taking a whole bunch of trees down
No.
here.
Well,
It's an
I think-
open area where the driveway would go. And we have, over the years, had trees and kept them and had them keep growing nicely because we anticipated hopefully being able to do this and then maintaining privacy. I mean, these trees don't grow up overnight, So we wanted that.
Yeah, so we have a month between now and our next, well, it's not a month, but we don't have another meeting in May. I mean, in that time, we could probably have the tree council go out and look at it, I guess. And maybe you guys could look at if you can make that 20 foot of frontage larger.
Just at the road?
Well, you need to
And
have,
narrow it down to 20 when it goes by the house so that there's enough room on the house. for
you
the-
really don't want to make irregularly shaped lots.
No,
So,
no,
Yeah,
that's what-
yeah.
no, I think what I was saying about you want to estimate what a two-car garage is, be a little conservative, right? And add the side yard setback to that, and that would be
We
the,
can do that.
and then get an idea how much you have there. So that, is it, instead of 20 feet, is it 25, is it 30, or is it 35? So that pole of the flag portion, you get it as wide as you can, not to impact trees and to, still be able to, potentially have the addition in the future. What's that number? Just kind of roughly. And if that works, and that would be something probably the ZBA can't speak for them, but they always want to minimize the request this is basically, if you had a 16-foot driveway, this is the minimum, right? Kind of. So if you just take a look at that and see how that all works out, I think we got time to do that. And Dave, take a look. I drove by today, but it's kind of tough. I had to pull in a driveway or something to, it's like, there's nobody behind me.
No, everybody does it.
Our houses are numbered so crazy.
Yeah.
Just
Took a couple times just to find it, yeah. So, but I think we do that and take a look at the trees with the tree council, right, Dave? And I think we can still put something on the agenda for the next meeting so that we can, if we're happy, we can tentatively have a resolution for sketch plan approval with making a recommendation to the ZBA, right?
Yeah. So for sketch plan approval, if you guys are approving it, you also classify it. So typically we would classify it as a minor subdivision, and then it gets denied and goes to the zoning board. But I mean, we can have the denial prepared. So
And when's, our next meeting is June 10th. So, and then the ZBA meets probably, this wouldn't be able to make the ZBA for June.
No.
It's too late.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think you can just call for sketch plan approval, and then at the next meeting, you could do your recommendation and it'd still be in time for the zoning board. Assuming, that we're happy.
All right. All right, so we need to take a look with the tree council, so I'm hearing, and see if we can modify that dimension, that still works, but move it up a little bit if we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of room there.
Does anybody else, have any comments or thoughts about this? You
I think
think that's reasonable?
You can include photos too of the tree line that you want to save, the side driveway.
Oh,
It's
okay.
always helpful, whatever information
Okay.
you can use to supplement this.
Okay.
I mean, this
Can I-
is a map that we generated just for the board's reference.
Oh,
The
okay,
color-coded one, looking at previous subdivisions, but
okay.
pictures would be good because.
Well, even
only
if I
couple-
took the Zillow map and it shows all the, does that help? Is it-
Aerials are
what-
good. A
Yeah,
good-
because it
A
shows.
good
the-
shot looking down your backyard or your driveway would show what trees,
Yeah,
they're the pines that you planted in a row.
yeah. Okay,
Okay?
all right.
All right, so I positive feedback, at least by a few of us. Obviously, we have to vote on this, but get some more data and we'll,
Okay, so June 10th. Come back again. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
With those changes, right?
Yep. Yeah, see what the best we can do with those changes. All right.
Yeah, and you probably want to, plan to have them to the planning department earlier so that Mr. Giapino can look. So as soon as you can make those changes, send them on over. Yeah.
If you want to stop by, is it okay to pull in the driveway? Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. All right, next up, let's, I guess we have nothing else right now on that, is 738 First Road, lot minor subdivision. And that's also Mr. Giapino.
Okay.
That one?
It's not in here, right?
Oh yeah, so that's the new, is that we haven't seen that yet, have we, Luigi?
No. But I will hand out.
Okay.
I apologize for this. The reason being on the, I think it was May 6th, I received comments from engineering department and didn't really get a chance to go out to the site till Friday and today. So we kind of put this together last minute just to have some of those answers for tonight's discussion. I'll hand out the hard copies, and it's not colored, but at least it's the same map that you have there, which shows the trees in the front. The subdivision is the same as what you've always seen. This shows the proposed finished floor elevations, garage floor elevations, grading, and driveways per our last discussion here that we had a couple weeks ago. So I'll hand these out right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I believe this keeps with not modifying the drainage ditch. Is that correct, Luigi?
When you say so.
So there's an existing drainage ditch.
Oh, correct. Yes.
On the north end that we were looking to try to preserve. So the result of that was to relocate the proposed addition to the back of the existing house.
Correct.
And then snake the driveway closer to the south lot line. Right.
That's
in order to avoid regrading and rerouting the drainage ditch.
That is correct. And these are our thoughts on the grading and driveway locations. We will certainly work with the surveyor, Mr. Metzger, who is performing or preparing the actual subdivision map that will be filed. And whatever we discuss and agree upon, these, I can certainly share these with Metzger to put on his final plan. So that is correct. We didn't want to relocate the drainage ditch on the property. We did get involved for the drainage analysis for this property. And that is, I can go through some of the comments there that engineering had discussed. Number one, a stone check dam is located on lot number 1. So the existing house being lot number 1 and the proposed new house being lot number 2. What we were proposing for the drainage system, if you want to call it that, everything from lot 2 drains to the existing drainage ditch. And the way I thought would make more sense was to have the stormwater basins, we'll call it, or swales on the existing lot. Since we're proposing an addition to the existing lot and making modifications to the existing lot, I felt that it was better to keep the stormwater on that lot since everything is draining, through that lot before reaching that drainage ditch. What this does is it frees up the future lot owner of 2 to come in and, build on this lot and say, all right, great. Now I just have to, get a plot plan grading permit and, maintain just a regular residential lot without really having the burden of any stormwater practices. And again, being that he's on the uphill side of things, everything naturally drains in that direction. And the way, being that it's all sand out there, the way it's designed is we're proposing a swale along the proposed property line. So yes, we call it a stormwater practice, but it's just a shallow swale line where, water will, drain. It'll be grass, it'll be mowable. And the stone check dam is simply just, on a heavy rainstorm to slow that water down just before the check dam. And then it'll slowly drain through the stone and be drained underneath the proposed driveway that we have. We're proposing a culvert pipe on lot 1. And then as far as that's to the front of the lot. Where we're proposing that swale, like I said, it's a shallow swale where it shouldn't impact many of the trees that are there. And that's what I showed on this plan. I showed approximate locations of those trees. And I believe we can save many of those trees up front so that when you're driving up and down Pierce Road, you're not changing the look of this lot. There are, some trees that do need to come down due to the driveway and the proposed house location, but we do believe that we can save many of those trees in the front yard. When you're looking at the back of the yard, we have another proposed drainage area. And again, everything drains naturally in this direction. And that natural depression in the backyard I have is along the slope of the drainage ditch so that, when you're looking out, the backyard, it's naturally sloping away to the drainage ditch, but it just has a slight depression in there to hold the water. But, it won't impact any future pools or anything that may go in the backyard. Because that's, who wants a hole in their backyard? So, we try to locate these things where, we try to keep them as natural as possible. So that was the intent there for the drainage. I think one of the discussions about the proposed addition was that it's most likely the garage will be a side-loaded garage and located at the rear. So we've increased the depth of driveway on the side there. And again, when a building permit gets applied for, further details and footprints, foundation plans will be supplied at that time. And, I think at that point it would be important to note that, the trees would be flagged at that time as well. The swale in the back and the proposed drainage system in the back is positioned in a way where you're not really cutting the trees in the backyard. It's heavily wooded in the front, right? Many of the trees in the front along Pierce Road can be saved, but when you look at the back, I think the grading can be done around the trees. They're a little more sporadic in the backyard. So I think that's important to note. And then as far as number 2, county approval, as we know, Pierce Road is a county road. We are proposing a 12-inch culvert underneath the proposed driveway for lot 1, but the culvert is on private property. It's not within the right-of-way. A curb cut is required anyways for any new curb cuts along Pierce Road, so a permit from the county is required. We can certainly have a note put on the plan so that at time of building permit, everybody's aware that a curb cut permit from the county is needed. And at that time, they'll review the culvert piping underneath, even though it's on private property. Number 3, the drainage area for lot 2 doesn't include any proposed changes to the grading. A site plan for development would need to maintain drainage under development conditions as it was analyzed in the study. Otherwise, the study will need to be revised. Again, we've updated the grading of that lot, and we're showing that we are grading in order to get the swales to, from uphill to downhill into these stormwater management areas. Number 4, please describe how stormwater will be conveyed from the entire house to the infiltration basin on Lot 1. This conveyance method must be included on the plan. And what we're proposing is when we do the addition, we'll put gutters on it, we'll take the downspouts, and we'll make sure that the leader is direct to the stormwater practice as we're proposing. So that is now added to our plan. And like I said before, we'll make sure all these changes will get put to the subdivision plans. And then lastly, how will the perpetual maintenance of the proposed stormwater maintenance practices be instituted? It would be something that I think the town has a maintenance agreement with that lot owner. It would be part of their deed to maintain it. And like I said, it's not a big burdensome for somebody that would take ownership of that lot, because it's sand there, it's natural low points and swales where you simply, grow grass, and if you maintain your grass, you can mow it. So there's not much maintenance to it, but I know from other projects we've done in the town, I believe the town has a standard maintenance agreement for such practices on private lots, and that's what we would do for this lot as well. Other than that, turn it over to the board for any questions. But we're here for an update, I believe, and maybe next month we can get this thing approved with any conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't have any questions. It's been, work in progress, and put a lot of effort into it. And I trust David, with his input, looks like we're getting there. I mean,
Yeah, so I didn't know if you guys want to discuss with the applicant. The CAC was looking at a conservation easement in the rear of the property like we did with the Caruso subdivision, if you guys remember that one. And a no further subdivision clause, because they were concerned that you might still be able to squeeze a lot in the back, although I think that would be pretty difficult. But, and then they just wanted to make sure that the engineering department was happy, which, I mean,
yeah.
we always have that. But I didn't know if you just want to discuss those. Roberto, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, regarding the conservation easement, I'd like to understand a little bit.
Yeah,
about
where
that.
would the conservation easement go?
Um,
I was involved in the Caruso
yeah, do you remember?
one,
I think it was,
and it was in the rear of the
It was
lot,
in the rear,
which was
yeah.
understandable. But on here, I guess I'm a little puzzled as to where would we put?
well, I think, my memory of the site isn't that great, but we thought that there was still a lot of large white pines in the back. Are you saying that there's not as many large white pines in the back?
Yeah, I don't think there's as many. They're further back, further away from where our proposed grading and development would be.
They're back in here and over in here.
Because if you go back there, right, like it's I think it's paved or whatever. It's a hard surface that goes around the back of the existing home that's there now.
Yeah, that's shown on your plans.
It's open here.
Yeah.
And it goes, you could.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. Maybe we could change that to just protecting the trees. generally
You just
speaking.
add a condition versus an easement, is that what you're saying, or?
Well, so the Caruso easement was actually partially because the drainage went through back there. It was like open drainage. And there was like discussion that the forest itself was actually detaining and delaying some of the stormwater. So that was kind of different, but I think the CAC was trying to balance that they had heard, well, we had heard concerns from the public about the nature of the trees and privacy and that kind of stuff. So they were thinking if we did a conservation easement in the back to protect the trees, that might mitigate some of those concerns.
A question on that. What happens when one or more of the trees get to a point where they're becoming a hazard? Does the owner have to come into the town to get permission to take them down?
I mean, if there's a very large tree on the edge of the conservation easement and, it has the potential to impact a home, I don't think that that's the intent of a conservation easement. But if there's a dead tree inside a conservation easement, you don't need to take them down.
You may wish to.
But it's a conservation easement, so you couldn't.
Well, but they do come down.
Right, but if
Especially
they're just gonna
evergreens.
fall in the forest, it's a conservation easement, so you can't just go in and
Well,
take dead trees down.
Depending on the size, the height of it, it could come down and damage other things in the house. You might have some outbuilding or something, Or people might simply be using the yard and have the tree come down. So most homeowners want the ability to take dead trees down so they don't have to deal with the risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes the CAC will err on a conservative recommendation to you guys and you temper it a little. I think we did that a little bit with 399 Anthony Street. Yeah, but I just wanted to bring it up because it was there. I mean, I feel like you guys should discuss it. But generally speaking, if a tree is a hazard to a house, I think you can take it down. But if you have a dead tree in a conservation area, habitat. So the point of a conservation easement is that there's a habitat. If you have a dead tree there and it's not going to hurt anything if it falls, it has to stay.
But you don't know that's not going to hurt anything because you don't know if somebody's going to be using that part of the property when it comes down.
But you can't put anything on a conservation easement.
But you can walk on it, you can have wildflowers and go take pictures or paint.
Yeah.
You know, you're limiting the use of the property and the ability to maintain it safe to a safe level. And that always concerns me. I had an evergreen I really didn't want to take down, but it got to a point where it was dying and dropping large limbs. In my case, it was adjacent to a neighbor's shed and my fence and all that stuff, but still, I would have felt just as responsible about removing the hazard if it had been not near those things.
Yeah. So the point of that recommendation was hopefully to add buffer and protect.
Just a couple things to note, though. I mean, it's not my call, obviously, but a couple things to note on this particular subdivision. I mean, there's an existing barn that lies or exists in the back of the property. I'd hate to see further restrictions, like if somebody wanted to put an in-ground pool in the backyard. If we limit that, then it kind of devalues the sale of that lot if you can't do anything else in the back, such as put like their own shed or do an in-ground pool. And, you know, to piggyback off Ms. Gold, you know, if somebody were to put a pool or go to the shed and they're in the back and, you know, you do have an issue with the fallen tree, somebody is back there. I don't particularly see the need for this lot. It's a little different than the one I was involved with Caruso's. But, you know, it's certainly up to this board.
Yeah, and it's not clear to me because they're not, you know, defined on the map, so I don't know what the impact is, you know.
Yeah, the subdivision plan does show the existing barn in the back. It's about 6 feet off the rear property line.
I think the subdivision plan shows it to be removed, so.
Yeah.
Right.
'cause
Yeah.
We
I
looked
need my
at it.
magnifying glass, that's all.
I mean, this
That's this one, right?
this plan.
Oh, that
is-
one. Okay, that's the concerns lot one. All right.
So the plan, actually, this version here that Luigi brought tonight is a lot less impactful to the site. I mean, there's already been development. He's using an existing driveway. There's 2 buildings that are coming down where there's no growth. There's no development in the back of the property on either one, which is where the white pines are. There's some towards the front too, but the big ones kind of straddle the property line and are collected in the south corner. I mean, I'm fine with putting no further development on that as one of the conditions, but you know, in fact, I think he's making more of an effort to not touch the drainage ditch and to not disturb as many trees as possible to squeeze in another driveway. And the mature trees are not collected on the north end of that drainage ditch. There's some growth there, but not anything significantly big. And just a stark contrast to the to the site there and across the road. There's nothing. I mean, they've totally clear cut the properties. So
On the Pierce Road?
Pierce Road,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, Luigi, you said in the back, the swale, you think you can work around the existing trees. In the front where the grading lines are, is that going to take a fair amount of those?
It may take 1 or 2, but not the majority of the trees. As Mr. Durpino stated, you know, we want to utilize the existing driveway. And if you go up that existing driveway, there's trees on both sides that, you know, doesn't require any grading because we would use the existing driveway. So, you know, a lot of the trees in the front, which, you know, makes it a nice setting when, you know, I drove in there today and I can understand that and appreciate that.
Yeah, it's very
I think
unusual.
it's important that, you know, the trees in the front, you know, so.
So we could kind of change that to the applicant shall retain as many trees on site as possible and place a special focus on the retention of the large old growth trees, especially when grading. And that's probably getting at the same thing that the CSE was really getting at. And that's a direct sort of incorporation of a tree council recommendation.
Yep.
Sounds better to me.
Okay,
Me too.
plus our normal conditions.
And the, as far as a further subdivision, I guess question for Mr. Hess, heard some conflicting information. How do we accomplish that? What's the best way to accomplish that? Is it a condition that says no further, or is it actually required part of the subdivision process when a deed is filed that there's a paragraph or statement in the deed? What's the best way to do
I've
that?
seen it done as a condition in the subdivision approvals. The issue with that is it doesn't give notice to future owners. So before I can counsel you on that issue, there was an issue raised tonight about whether or not we're able to require the deed restriction. I know we have done it in other contexts, but I don't know if we can do it for this. If we can, I'm not saying that we should do it here, but I like that idea best because it gives notice to future owners if we're able to.
Yeah, obviously, look into that as far as, and I would appreciate that, because, this is just, we've talked about other subdivisions, so, and to Mr. Khan's point earlier, I totally agree. Let's figure out the format, the best way to do it, and on a go-forward basis, especially if it's not a big burden on the applicant, to make sure we get that, to prevent future problems.
Also note on this too, though, that there's not enough frontage to further subdivide, right? The town code requires 100 feet.
Well,
and they would need a variance.
I mean, the variance, right.
Like
we talked about earlier, the other,
Mhm. Yeah.
so.
Yeah, we'll definitely want to do something like that here because the entire area we've made the case is very subject to variances.
Understood.
right?
Yep.
So, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Just,
So we're trying not to burden the applicant.
We're a little
but
more awake now.
Yeah, we got to be careful. So,
And there's been a flip side on deed
You okay with
restrictions that the town could not actually enforce them. It was up to the neighbors to enforce them by going to court. But of course, the deed restrictions we've had in the past were not ones imposed by the town, so I don't know. The town can legally impose them and maybe it could enforce them. But
Well, there's two different issues here, but one that relates to us is whether or not we could enforce it, if they came back asking for something new, it would be both, right? It would be both a condition in the subdivision approvals and a deed restriction. So we'd have something to work with. I will try to, prior to the next planning board meeting, have more information about the best way to handle that issue.
Right.
yeah, because
And the info is, the key thing I think is really how does the future owner know?
Right, I agree.
yeah. So as it relates to this application, what was the goal for the next meeting? Where do we stand? Kind of.
So we've had a sketch plan approval and a public hearing. We're at the point of minor subdivision approval. And the things we would need would be just sort of, I guess, formal responses to the engineering comments. And then the revised subdivision plan, or we're seeing it tonight. It's similar to what we talked about and looked at before. So I think as long as we have the revised subdivision plan and the engineering comments are finalized, then we can work on the conditions for you guys for the next meeting. And then if you want a little bit longer to look at it, you could just table it.
Yeah, so a tentative resolution for the next meeting. We'd also like Mr. Hess hopefully has the time to, if we're going to have a condition or something regarding future subdivision, we want to have that incorporated all at the same time. If we can come through all that, I know you guys have been working on this a while. I'm sure you want to get there also, right?
Yes, definitely. Talking to the applicant, I wasn't part of the first process, when he first made the application, but I think he's been here now 6 or 7, he said
Oh,
to
yeah.
me. So
Yeah.
if we could do anything to make it a tentative, I feel confident that I can get all the information to Laura, both our plans and the subdivision plan updated and in your hands, being that there's a little more than, 2 or 3 weeks before the next meeting.
It's almost 4.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Okay. You okay with that, Mr. Deere?
that would be great if we could move this along. I
Yeah,
think
we'd like
we're-
to move it along.
And we will put that CSE recommendation into the condition.
Yeah, we'll combine the CAC with the tree council like we talked
Right.
about.
And
Yeah.
we'll get some guidance on the deed restriction.
Yep. And hopefully move this along and if it ever stops raining. Get some work done.
It can't be done that way. Can we require the note on the subdivision plan?
Definitely,
Accomplish
but
the
the
same.
issue is that the new owner in the future may not actually pull the subdivision plan. That's,
Well, I put it on the map for each lot. I mean, a good title search would find that.
we'll look at the options. I'll report
Okay.
back.
Okay. Any other questions from the board to the applicant, or do you have anything for us? or-
No, I don't
Okay.
think so.
All right,
He's not going far.
we're getting there. Okay, not going far. Yeah, change hats.
Yeah.
All right, so we're okay with this for tonight then, and we'll work on a tentative resolution. Hopefully I can get the submittal in and get it reviewed, and hopefully get there, okay?
Okay, thank you. I'll be right back.
All right. And next up, we have, let's see, 2340 Nut Street East, 25-unit apartment building. It's Mr. DiArpino's night tonight. looks like.
Yeah, we've all come back to light. So, last week I went and walked the site just to get a good bearing of where it was, walked along the sidewalk on Knott Street, took a look at some of the topographic features, and then studied the new plan, which I'll let Luigi present to give you some of the new updates.
Just as a practical matter, is this where the wooded area is right now? Is that like literally it would like that all that wooded area would be taken down and then that would go? Okay.
Yes.
Fence.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So what I have up here, again, for, what's the address of this thing again?
2340 Knott Street.
Yeah, that's it. What I have up here is what was presented to the board last time. If you recall, we were proposing a berm, right, on the west end, southwest end of the site. And, you know, I thought I was a hero at that meeting, but some of the planning board members were humming and hawing, and maybe I had it too high, okay, you know, but I was willing to knock it down. So what happened was Mr. Fusco and I looked at this plan again, and it dawned on us about all the earthwork and grading work in order to cut this hill out and get that driveway around. We had discussions. We reached out to the architect and asked him the question if, you know, we needed this drive-through. There's other sites that Mr. Fusco was involved where only had one entrance, and it got us thinking again. So what we did was we removed this driveway that heads down underneath into the garage on the one end, which helps grade this whole southwest site. You don't need a berm anymore. It's not a major cut anymore. So less material coming off site. And then without needing this radius or this length so that you don't have a steep slope to get down here, we actually shifted this building southwest slightly to get it further away from Greens Farm Road, number one. And number two, we eliminated this 8-foot retaining wall along Greens Farms Road around that stormwater basin. Also, with not having to make a major cut here, we were able to save more trees around the perimeter. So in all, we believe that the changes that we've made should be better. I hope everyone agrees with that. So this is the new plan that we provided to the board. And as you can see, you know, by removal of this driveway, we shifted this over. You know, we still have the stormwater areas in the same locations as we had before, but, you know, we eliminated the wall. And actually we eliminated other walls that were proposed on the southwest end of the building as well. This increases green space, right, by removal of the driveway. So the green space goes up. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, we're able to save more trees. And we're also proposing some pines that we had talked about in the previous plan as well. So even though we've increased the preservation of existing trees on site, we are also proposing some mixed pines, whether they be in this orientation or, more in a linear fashion. We can certainly, work with the planning board on that. But those are the biggest changes. The number of units stays the same. The building footprint stayed the same. It was simply site plan changes that were made. And instead of redesigning the stormwater practices, those are actually designed now on a more conservative basis because we removed impervious surfaces, but we left the size of those basins the same, which will help the whole situation with retaining the stormwater and less peak discharge rates to Greens Farms Road. The other thing that we did was discuss the building elevations. For a while, this was really the hot topic of discussion was, what the look would look like. At one point, if you remember, we had flat roofs and, then we had some other plans, but this is more or less, I think, what Mr. Durpino has reviewed. And, we may still need to make some tweaks, but this is the general basis of what we're proposing. So we're hoping the planning board likes our changes. And since I'm going to be here at the next meeting, I'm hoping maybe we can, get this thing moving as well, because it's been around the block for way too long. And, Mr. Fusco would like to start construction, this summer or early fall. He's working on a project right now in Gilderland, which is, if everything goes right here, he can, move his equipment right to here and get to work. So that's the game plan. And what I'll do is I'll ask the planning board if they have any questions at this time.
Did the GFEs change by shifting the building a little bit?
No, it did not. Nope, the finished floor elevations remain the same. Again, everything's driven by Greens Farms Road. The grading changed a little bit, but as far as the finished floor elevation, that remained the
So
same.
that means that the height of the roof is still the same?
Correct, yes, we're not requesting any variances.
And the two-way traffic, I mean, you originally have two-way traffic in the garage.
We did,
Right.
yeah, so 24 feet minimum was always proposed in the garage itself. One thing we did do was, we it's more of an architectural thing, but we had to, it was I think what was it? Maybe like a 12-foot door. Right now, it's going to be a larger door to accommodate a two-way traffic through there.
What about emergency access?
Yeah, so we had discussions initially with the fire department. And what we had to do, I don't know if any of you recall, but we had this as a 24 foot wide aisle that you typically do for two-way parking. And what we had to do was we had to widen this to 26 foot so that if when they get their aerial apparatus in here, they can sit right in this area here and fight any fire that they would need to. This plan never had plans, the fire truck wouldn't come down into here because if they got down in there, they wouldn't be able to get out. Whereas the new plan would be very similar. The fire truck would come in and then they would back out. This acts as like a T turnaround and then they would be able to get out. And that's what they would do here as well. Other discussions we had with the fire department and that's why we graded the back the way we did initially, and it stays the same today, is that providing a flatter area around the back so that at least they can access it by foot. This building will be fire sprinklered. So, that has another set of parameters where when the building is fire sprinklered, the fire truck has different distances for hose lengths and things like that for fighting the fires. But we can certainly, sit down with the fire chief one more time with this plan. It's not much different from that plan there, so it is something that, we
Inside
can
the
do.
garage, there's enough room to turn around if somebody, say, I don't want to say it's full or whatever, but if there's not empty parking spots, is there a hammerhead at the end or of empty spots at the end so they can?
Yeah, we don't have one proposed. A lot of times, right, I guess here, normally with the handicap striping, that's your spot to turn in and back up if they are full. But we can certainly add a striping at the end to provide for that. We have plenty of parking, under the building and outside. So we can certainly, look at that and,
Yeah,
I
just wanna
think
make sure
that's a good idea.
You don't want to have to back out if it's full. I'm not sure, what
Right. Yeah.
the numbers show whether parking would be full or not,
Okay.
The other thing I just noticed, and it's only a minor comment, the striping of the walkway across the parking lot now and the new plans like on a diagonal there. So you're kind of relocating, I know that you need to come across because of the topo lines over there where it's flat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason doing it that way?
You'd like to see more perpendicular.
I think we could discuss it.
I think the grades are flat enough through here where I can, move the handicap parking spaces and the striping.
It just seemed that if you want to encourage walking, in the crosswalk, if there's all that sidewalk in front of the building, you got to walk all the way to the end to get to the
Mhm.
crosswalk. If it was kind of like in a happy medium, you could go either way, right?
Right.
But anyway, I'm not the expert, just looking at it, it seems like that could be.
So why did you had it straight down in the original plan?
Yeah, we did.
So there was a reason why you did it like that.
I guess when I was looking at this, just, I always hate, it's maybe more of an engineering thing, but I always hate when you're walking across a sidewalk and you got to come down and then back up. So I think the second time around when I looked at it, I thought it would be better to move the handicap spot to the end, and then you just have one ramp at the end that everybody would just come in and out. And then this would be just a straight sidewalk without any dips. Because, sometimes, right, you're walking, you're texting, and, you hit that ramp coming down and you're like, you get stumbled a little bit. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it really,
think,
it doesn't matter to me either. It's just
Yeah.
an observation. I don't know what's best,
The other sidewalk aligned with what would be considered the main front door. I think on
Yeah.
the other plan, now that it's shifted.
Yeah, the front door was always over in this
10
location.
feet to the southwest. Now it's off.
Right.
axis.
The main front door is not the door in the middle of the building.
No.
It's a door.
It's a door.
Correct. He sent the floor plans a month ago.
So the main front door is one of the little white doors on the left. That one?
It is off-centered. The main door is off-centered.
There's a big door in the middle, though.
Yeah, I'll have to clarify that.
Yeah. I think the elevations still need to be refined. It doesn't show the new entry for the double. Yeah, the double.
Yeah,
doors.
I did notice that.
Mr. Fusco did confirm that there are only rooms with windows on the two side elevations because they are mechanical rooms. Oh,
Oh, no.
Dave. Oh, see, he's gonna-
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Luigi.
I was gonna ask you about that, David. The east elevation still to me, or sorry, the west elevation, I think, given that it's a lot higher from Knott Street East, if you picture yourself ascending that hill on Knott Street East, it's going to be a very imposing side of the building.
yeah.
And there's not much to break up that facade.
Yeah, these elevations I think still need to be refined. What the goal was of these was to get the dormers and some consistency with the window rhythm, so that they were the same. So they was utilizing the same gable continuously, not using 3 different types. That's,
It looks a
Yeah.
world, this
well,
world of difference.
we're moving forward, but it still needs to be refined based on the latest plan.
Mhm.
Can I see where the path is? You said there's a path going now, be going from Van Antwerp to not.
Well, there's an easement for a future connection.
There's an
Oh,
easement,
okay.
right?
All right. Okay.
Yeah, an easement would need to be obtained by the property to the
Gotcha.
south.
I see. So it only
In
goes
order
to
to
the
even
property
make that.
line, and then in case in the future that becomes available.
Right.
I see. Okay.
I think the other comment was the positioning of the new trees on the sidewalk along that street. That
Well,
was one of
we're
the-
asking for street trees, but he's got the street trees planted on private property, and the only issue with that is that if they're on private property, they're private trees. So I don't know how hard it would be to just shift them over to be in the town's right of way.
Oh, there's a lot of utilities within the right of way.
are
here.
there? Oh,
Yeah, they're showing on the plan, but there's, underground, electric, there's, gas. And it's not like it's a straight, like it zigzags and it comes across the concrete sidewalk. And then there's an existing 36-inch culvert pipe. I mean, there might be some areas where we can move, but generally speaking, they want to see those trees at least 10 feet away from any utility lines.
Okay. Because actually, the trees in front of the Knott's Landing East are not in the right of way either. But again, we have no control over them if they're not in the right of way. Which
One thought on the relocation of the crosswalk. At least that way, they don't have to walk between parked cars, which can be good for both the people walking, the pedestrians, and for the owners of the car.
yeah,
Because if you're coming back from shopping, you got a bunch of bags, you could be scratching the cars. And if it's bad weather and the cars haven't been moved, you might not have the best footing.
It's too bad you didn't have another layer for another garage with a lift. Get rid of the parking out front.
Right.
Well, but you
It's
want
commendable that you're
guests in
putting
the
parking
garage.
under the building. I mean, that's.
Right, I
Yeah,
agree.
no, it's great.
Yeah.
It would just result in a larger paved area because of the number of units.
Correct.
So it's definitely a nice feature. And I think you've solved a lot of the site work things with this plan that it's become much more practical with the site the way it is.
I
So the
agree.
big breakthrough was just that hard time he gave you about the berm, huh?
Yeah, that's all it took.
Well, and of course, now you don't need the septic system because you can go right on sewer.
Correct. Yep.
That's where it first started, right? Laura, are you okay with trees not being in the right of way?
I mean, yeah, it's not my favorite, but I think that they'll be valuable, regardless of the property that they're on.
It's not like you're gonna keep them unmaintained.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll if they're over those utilities, they may even shift a little further down. when they-
You don't want them over each other.
Yeah, they will.
Because then they're gonna get taken down.
Yeah, you're just gonna lose them.
So you need them to be in a safe place, that's still valuable. And actually, that position is probably more in line with the other ones. We did talk about this before, but we've asked for HVAC to be put on the plans multiple times because you said that it couldn't be on the roof, I think.
Right. Yeah, I don't think they would be on the roof.
Yeah. So I think we just wanted to see where those would go and probably have, I don't know, landscaping or fencing around them or something. And
wherever they go, I'd like appropriate baffling.
yeah. And I mean, my just other comment was that there's still not a whole lot of landscaping and buffer between the Greens Farm Road and the dumpster masonry walls over there. I know that there's a bioretention basin and it says that it's supposed to have plantings. And if those plantings are like large and can end up being a screening, I guess that's one thing, but I think you're still not properly screening the condo people with vegetation as required by our code.
For the dumpster, you mean, or?
Well, for the dumpster and for that back of the building, like Patrick was saying, like that is going to be the tallest that building looks because that's the lowest grade where the cars are entering it. And so you're going to see the full parking 1-story, 2-story, 3-story. So I think you do need to adjust. I know you added one red maple for me, but I think that you really need to look at landscaping around the, just
Yeah, I think, you're right. Originally, we had that retaining wall, right, where that made up that 8-foot grade change. Now we're going to have a slope. And what I think we can do is maybe add a few more pines right along the edge here. That could soften the look from Greens Farms Road to the garage.
Because it's tall. So anything you can do with the landscaping to mitigate the height of that building, like, I don't think you were involved with this one, Luigi, but 1769 Union Street is a 3-story building and it has just tiny vegetation along the bottom and it just looks so large. So like if there's some way that we can come up with a landscaping plan that mitigates the height, because this is the town center overlay district, there's residential, on either side, and we really want it to be, and when people start taking those trees down, it's going to be very traumatizing for the community. So anything we can do to mitigate with the landscaping, I really think that we should look at.
Okay.
I mean, overall, this plan is a lot better.
Way better.
I'm trying to think about all the ways in which it would not be better, but it actually is better. But I think we still have a few items left before we can call for a tentative resolution, right?
I mean, it's up to you. We have a month. But I definitely still like to see more landscaping and changes.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable request. I don't know if you got other concerns on.
No, I mean, it's just,
It's gonna do, whatever it is, it's gonna be a pretty significant mark on the landscape of Knott Street.
Mhm.
So you're
No,
gonna
it's
want it to be, we're all gonna want it to be a thing that actually enhances the streetscape of that area, rather than something that people are gonna be like, why is that there? So it's.
Louis, maybe we can summarize for us, where we're at. So if we would like to have a tentative resolution for next meeting, what do you have left to do for the next, to get there?
Yeah, I don't think there's much for me to do. I'll certainly work on a landscaping plan that we talked about tonight. I'll share it with Laura, and we'll fine tune, anything with Mr. Derpino on the building elevation.
And the doors.
We
that's-
have a little under a month. I feel confident that we would definitely get all of this information to the town probably in a couple weeks. And then if you could schedule a tentative resolution, that would be great. And, maybe at that time we'll have everything in front of you. And if we got to make maybe some minor adjustments, we'll accept like a conditional approval at that time.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, now that you've got the plan and the site situated, the architect should run with the floor plans that he's developed, because I've seen them, and get the elevations up to speed.
Okay.
I mean, that's going to be much more helpful. I know what it's going to look like, but these guys need to see, that overhead door, the swale coming down, show the site configurations of what you're going to be looking at.
Okay.
And
The HVAC systems too, definitely.
Yes, I've got sit down with fire chief, add turnaround striping under the building, landscaping plan, fine tune building elevations, and add the HVAC with baffling.
remind them about that roof railing too.
So is that something you do want, the roof
We liked it.
railing?
I liked it. I don't think the planning board saw that.
No, it was a sketch that we had done during one of the working sessions, but even if it's just on some of the central pieces, it helps break up that roof line and give it a little bit more definition.
Okay.
And then how he's going to treat the porches. Those were some of the refinements that Dan was still Dan?
Yes.
Architect. Okay. I think he's put it on hold until you get through your site, moving the building around. Is that the right impression?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So now he's got a month or so to really crack down and refine it.
Yeah, and you're gonna add the little dip down on the one entrance that it dips down.
To show the
Yeah.
garage, correct. Yep. That's the east elevation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Luigi, I had a question about the path, the pedestrian access to Knott Street. Do you have a general idea of what that, what the pitch of that path is? I'm wondering how steep that's going to be from top to bottom.
Yeah, so starting here near Knott Street, it's fairly flat. And as you get up through here, there's that natural berm that lies.
Oh, I'm
And-
sorry. I meant the path to get to the parking lot from the.
The sidewalk.
Oh, right,
Yellow-
right in here?
yellow line.
Oh, yeah, that's fairly flat. It would be less than a 5% grade,
Okay.
which meets handicap code for not
Okay.
having a railing.
Any thoughts on, I don't know, straight shot versus a winding path? Is one more aesthetically pleasing than the other?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Sometimes when it's curvy, people take the path of least resistance, and then you see the grass strips that are dirt.
Snow removal is tough.
Plus, if you've
Yeah,
got,
snow removal.
if you've got people with disabilities, they don't want the winding path usually.
Just a thought, as long as it's safe.
Right.
So does that mean that we want it aligned straight?
I'm flexible.
Or we're happy with the way it is?
It doesn't bother me
Yeah.
either way. I think it eventually people are going to figure out where's the best place to cross, and then you may restripe it differently,
Mhm.
Oh, I see what you're
after 10 years or something, or 8 years.
I mean, the main advantage of the way you have it right now is that it's not going in between any cars,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's near one of the access points.
Yeah.
Versus being in the middle between the two of them, right? And
Yeah.
then, like you said, then people are just gonna go where way they want.
Yeah, so it doesn't look asymmetric, but I think it might be more functional.
Okay. Sounds like a pretty good list, but doable, right?
Yeah, definitely doable. Yep.
All right. Great. All right. So another tentative resolution for the next meeting.
All right, appreciate
That
it.
we get there in
Coming on all these, we should be good.
a while. Anything else, Luigi?
I think that's it.
Okay,
I can
well,
go
thank
home
you.
now.
Again, thanks for your patience tonight.
All right.
Long agenda tonight. All right, let's see. And last is, not last, discussion item 2227 Knott Street Farmers Market, call for public hearing. And there was an agenda statement in the packet prepared by the planning office, of course. I did have the opportunity to speak to Laura for a couple minutes today. And I'm sure she's going to have some additional information for us because obviously, we've looked at other things similar for the public before, and there was, questions like on, when, how long, how many, safety, so on, hours of operation. So
Yeah.
so she's got some information for us.
So we wanted to keep the application a little general because this is like a trial run, so they're actually only holding it 3 times in 2019, or hoping to hold it 3 times in 2019. And essentially would be pretty small, but if it goes well in 2019, then you might see, more than once a month. But like right now, it's 3 times in 2019. The third, do you remember what it is?
Second Tuesday, or second Saturday.
Second Saturday.
Second Saturday.
And it's in the morning. So I think it was either 8:30 to 11:30 or 9:30 to 11:30, but it's just a minimal amount of time in the morning. And for the first 3 times that they would hold the farmer's market, the police, they've been talked to the supervisor. The police would definitely be there to guide traffic and guide people across the crosswalk and just make sure that there's generally a safe environment for the farmers market to be held in. So the police are committed to helping people cross the road and managing parking. The parking would be in the normal co-op parking lot across the street. To make the co-op would remain open during the farmers market as well as the other businesses. So to make some extra space, I think that they would arrange for their staff to, park elsewhere to give some extra spaces for parking. And I think the reason that they chose this space is because it's generally speaking where they have events, like they have their chili cook-off and stuff like that. So it's places where it's a good gathering place, and it's a place where they can set up tables and they have access to electricity and all that stuff. Theoretically, if it got very popular, they would have to come back to us because we have it on one side of the road, but then they could move it across the street. But for now, because it's small and they don't have that many vendors, like their max is 12, and each space is 10 feet by 10 feet. They don't think they think they want to put it where people are sort of used to doing those events at the co-op and have that extra police presence and just see if it's successful.
You know, and that was my concern, Laura, like when we talked earlier, is the agenda statement says potentially police to.
Oh, it's definitely true because I didn't know that at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I could, because obviously, the work that's going on down there with the county and, with the fatality we've had in the past, it's important that we have, people parking cars and coming across there. We want to make sure that they're directed. I'm not saying it has to be the police. Do we have like certified traffic guards or something like that?
No, I think it's definitely, I confirmed with the co-op and the supervisor that the police
That'd be
are scheduled to be there.
I know there's a cost associated with that also,
I can't remember because I've never been back, but in the back of the parking lot, does it connect out this way?
It does.
Because I thought that's where the delivery trucks come.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, and they would arrange
Yeah.
for, all, because it's a short amount of time, but they would arrange for all the deliveries and stuff to work around that
So
area.
people can still wander out back there, I think.
They could,
Yeah.
yes, they can.
you can
Yeah,
get in the
walkers, it'd be no problem. Mhm. There's an alleyway.
So if they decide they want to expand to across the street, they would have to come back.
For site plan, yeah. It's,
And if they wanted to operate more at the proposed site, more frequently or anything, would they come back or would that just?
I mean, I feel like it's, so there's two processes here. It's a site plan and a special use permit. So the special use permit is for the use. And if they're having a farmer's market, they're having a farmer's market. So like, I don't think they need to return to a special use permit if they're making changes like the number of times that they're having the market or the location. But if they're making a substantial change, I do think that they should come back to the planning board just to run it by. Like I don't think that we need to approve it for 3 times only. So like if they move it, so like I think right now it's June, July, August, but if next year they have it on the second Saturday every month, but for a longer month range, I think that'd be okay. But if they start having it like every week, then maybe we could have them check in with the planning board just to make sure that that's not, severely impacting operations or
No.
something like that.
Most farmer markets are every week, so
Yeah.
that's why I was wondering.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've heard that the Union, you guys reviewed the Union Street Farmers Market is no more.
So I'll tell you,
So
this is gonna be popular.
this is gonna be very
This
popular.
is gonna be very popular.
Yeah,
Again, it's no more.
The Union Street Farmers Market.
Yeah.
The one on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Okay.
Behind.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, because we actually approved that one for the Coldwell Banker building.
Yep.
And then it moved back to Schenectady because it had a parking lot in Schenectady, and then I
And
don't
now
know.
that's gone too.
I do think, it will be popular. I do think you will get some traffic
Well-
complaints going through there.
I won't be going. I won't deal with the traffic there.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
On a weekend, again, I think it will be popular. I think it's sort of it's gonna be a trade-off. You're gonna have, if you're going there and going to go to the farmer's market, you might think it's great, but if you have to get to the casino, I don't know, like someplace out, for lack of a better place, you may not be happy.
Yep, so that's why, I think, the police presence for, traffic and pedestrian safety, I think is a must. And I think we can give it a shot, is my view,
And if you guys are comfortable, you could call for a public hearing and just see, what people, if concerns from the public, because sometimes they think of stuff that we haven't thought of. But yeah, I think parking and operation of the businesses and just making sure that it's a safe crossing were the 3 things that came to my mind.
Are they going to put any sort of like a sign up even the week ahead of time, just kind of preparing people that the traffic is going to be completely different the following week?
Yeah, because the town is the operator of the farmer's market, they would probably I don't know if you guys seen it, but we have this big sign. It's actually an LED sign, but it doesn't flash or have a message change, I don't think. But yeah, we could put that sign up in either direction, like a day or 2 before the farmer's market, just so that people know it's coming because it's once a month, so it's not going to be as intuitive. Yeah, we were talking about that. The only thing is those signs also mark water main breaks and they belong to the town. So if there's a water main break, it would get pulled off the co-op. But generally speaking, I think we'd probably put those signs up so people, as a warning, so that people know that that's coming. And then if they want to avoid the area to get to, let's say Ellis Hospital.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody's okay with a public hearing for both our recommendation for a special use permit and for site plan for the next meeting? You okay with that? And if anybody has any thoughts in the meantime, give
Yes,
Laura a
send them over.
call or email Jeff or Laura, just things that you think of that you might want to address prior to that. And I assume, Laura, you.
Yeah, because I looked at the last time we reviewed the farmer's market, and I think we just had a couple conditions about signage. So if that's something that we would want to include our recommendation, just so that people were aware that there might be additional
Yeah,
traffic.
well,
in
we
the
might
area.
have a condition,
Yeah.
the police.
And then the police, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, because
I
we
would think
know,
that'd be important.
yeah, because we know that can be a difficult location to cross.
I'm sure the public hearing, you'll probably get suggestions for other locations from the public would be my guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
But,
We can call it. See
We'll hear
what
what they have to
happens.
say. All right. Sounds good. All right, we'll keep this moving along. Reports, you have anything, Laura?
No, I think that David can jump in. He's doing a presentation tomorrow at the town board. Oh, sorry. Yes, I do have a report. We are holding the forums for the Holocaust Memorial at the Little Theater in the high school this Wednesday. And then there'll be another one, 1 week from Wednesday. And I'm going to try and make maps because I went to the high school today and I've never been to high school. I'm sure you guys probably always have been, but I got lost. Poor people took pity on me. So I think that, we'll try and make some maps and post some signs. But yeah, Wednesday at 7. And I think Jengis and I talked, and because you're a project lead on that, right?
Yep.
So we're hoping to have at least some attendance from the planning board and some attendance from the town board just to listen, but there'll be a presentation from the applicant on the changes to the design and then a lot of time for the public to speak.
Will it also be on the YouTube channel?
No, because they don't have the same capability as we do for recording.
Will it be recorded, though?
I am bringing,
Tape
I'm bringing that. That's the only way that we have to record it. It's not the same technology, but it can fit a lot of people. So what happened at the town board public hearing was that they had even more people than you guys had, and people couldn't fit in the room. And it was just very hard and uncomfortable to people. So they wanted to schedule a larger space
Is
for
this
them.
actually a public hearing or an informational meeting?
It's just a community forum. It's not a public hearing.
So they're still going to have to hold the public hearing.
No, they already had their
They
public
already had
hearing.
it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Their public hearing was even more attended than yours. I would say by
Oh,
probably an
so you're
additional
saying
20
that
people.
the
So if you
design-
guys remember, your wall was lined,
Yeah, I remember.
but they actually had to turn the speakers on because there was a good 20, 30
Yeah.
people in the rotunda. So they couldn't even hear what was being said very well. So they wanted to schedule a space where people could sit and hear.
Right.
And they're trying to make it so that people don't need to stand in line because it can be hard when you're standing in line. So they're pre-registering, or you can register when you get there so that we'll call up names so you don't have to be standing in line
If
for
one of
an
us
hour.
wanted to go, do we need to register too, or?
No. Unless you wanted to speak, but it's just a community forum. I'm just going to reserve some spaces in the back for town board and planning board people.
time to start again?
7.
And as a practical matter, the town board needs to approve the special use permit, and then assuming that, if that were to take place, it would come back to us for site.
Right. So, and Kevin was just asking, their site plan has essentially not changed. Their parking lot is exactly the same. The drainage is exactly the same. The little box where the memorial is that we were looking at is exactly the same. The banked bathrooms is exactly the same. The only thing that's changed is the inside of the memorial, which we really didn't discuss. But that was something that, that we had put in our recommendation to the town board was please find community consensus. And so to follow along and find community consensus, they did do some significant changes to the design. And so that's really what they're sharing with the public.
I mean, if there were one thing, I think that it doesn't have to be a formal meeting, but I would be interested at least to know relative to the neighbors across Route 7, what new sight lines are to what objects.
So they have that, yeah. And they even actually did that's in their presentation. They even did a test where they held up it's actually kind of the test that we weren't that happy with you on, but they held up a big orange balloon and then took pictures of it, from various locations on Route 7. They have a lot of that information that's in their presentation, and they are sharing that with the community. And then anybody who can't speak on Wednesday can speak on 22nd, and we'll still do the presentation. So anybody who can't make it on the 15th, am I saying those dates right, Jeff? Yeah. See, I can't. Anyway.
So say that again. It's there's one this Wednesday.
15th.
And then another one.
Yeah, on the 22nd. So if you can't make they'll do the same presentation on the 22nd.
So Laura, for directions, were you planning on posting that on the website or put out the? Routine
Yeah, I was thinking about trying to put a map or something on the website just for people who don't go to the high school a lot.
Sure they can find it.
Because I had a hard time. You guys probably wouldn't be.
Visitors are normally discouraged now.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
It's part of the security of the
another
building,
weird
so.
thing about doing it at high school and putting up a map. It's, but
They're gonna leave the doors open to the little theater, and so everybody can just park in front of off Knott Street. So you can just park in that parking lot off Knott Street and then just walk right in. But I couldn't do that today.
Okay, so
Today I
that's-
had to go through the main entrance and then get lost.
Okay, so they're not gonna have people, this makes sense. They're not gonna have
Yeah.
people go through the school.
No.
You're
They're
walk
just gonna
right
have the
in.
doors open. They can just walk into the little theater. But for people who don't know, like the door actually has like a big number on it. So I can probably easily just say, go to door number 4. I just have to go see what it was. I noticed that when I was driving around here and like park in this place. And hopefully that makes it easier for people. Because, you know, the one side is that the room's more comfortable and it can fit a lot more people. But on the other hand, people who come to the public aren't necessarily used to going there. So I just want to make it as easy as possible.
That sounds good.
The school might not want any directions inside the school posted.
Yeah, I can keep them
In
on the
terms of-
doors.
yes.
Yeah, but no, with this way,
Get us
there's
there,
no-
and then
yeah,
they
there's
may
no-
have signs there directing us once we're inside. but
Yeah, but like
they
I could
wouldn't
put a
want that
sign on the main
posted on.
entrance saying like, you know, walk around and then put a big sign on the doors that you can go
Laura,
through.
you'll be able to check if the neighbors across the street are gonna be able to, have registered, right?
They already emailed me, so I know that they're aware. Well, at least a couple of them. Yeah.
Any new concerns that you've seen so far or?
No, I mean, I think that the applicant really listened to a lot of the concerns that the public had with the, you know, with the sight lines and the design. You know, we tried to stay out of that, but the applicant, I think, did try to
So the newspaper article, so the applicant is still Dr. Lozman, right?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
But the newspaper article hinted a little bit, or at least had a tone that, the last statement that Mr. Golub made, you know, we were asked to do something and now it's up to them, right?
So I didn't read I apologize. I actually, there's a whole Yorniskiuna thing going on right now, but I am not getting the Yorniskiuna and I don't make an effort to go online and read these articles. So I actually haven't read that one. But I mean, essentially when Dr. Lozman was trying to find consensus, he did reach out to Neil Golub and Jewish Federation, and they worked together and they essentially hired a new design firm for the memorial itself, Dembling and Dembling. And those are the guys that are presenting. And so, I mean, Dr. Lozman is the original applicant, but I think that, you know, there's some significant partners in this that we didn't see before.
And that was one aspect of comments that we had raised
Yeah,
during
we
the
did.
process. I mean, granted, the concerns were raised on a number of different lines about the sight lines and the traffic and all that, but one of the concerns as well was sort of about the stark nature of the structure. And we kept on saying you might want to get some consensus, and they a very laborious process, it sounds like,
Very.
but ultimately, kudos to them for actually trying to take what was a very difficult, you know, process and ultimately find something that a lot of people, at least it seems to be, is reported to us as being.
Yeah, I don't think it's nearly as stark, but it took a lot of the design elements that were originally in what we saw and incorporated them in, but in like a less stark way. And it, you know, it's not like a long wall. You guys can actually see it online. It's in that, you can just click on it. Yeah, but so it's not like that big long wall that would be difficult to even break up with vegetation.
And the heights are no higher than the wall.
They're no higher than the wall, but now they're sort of, you know, going out at different angles so that it's not, it's essentially like a broken up facade, which is going to fade into the trees a little bit better.
But the design is very different than the original structure was
very different.
proposed.
Yeah.
And one of the key things for me is that the educational component is no longer integral to the design of the structure. And they're still working on the educational components, so we don't know what that's going to be.
Yeah, they
It's
have-
not relevant, but they are promising to deliver it.
Right. So their slides are actually, they talk about the educational component and it's not written into the slides, but it's there. So because they actually.
It's not developed all the way.
Right, not all the way, but they do have the way that they're working the education into it because it's sort of a circle now rather than a square. But the circle fits inside of the original square. But yeah, they are still working on some of that.
When I first saw the design, my concern was that the educational component had been totally abolished from the project, in which case it wouldn't fit the criteria.
Oh, no, I would say
But
it's
they've-
probably
I
stronger.
have had some contact.
Oh,
with
yeah, I
members
think
of
the educational component,
group,
even though
and
it's not
It's being
finalized,
developed.
is probably stronger than the original one that we saw. Because they have different stops of education along the way, and then they have a really sort of powerful inside. It's very great. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I would love for you guys to come, if you can, to listen to the,
I'm gonna try to make it this week.
yeah.
Okay, who's in charge of timer?
Paul Briggs.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Lay out the ground rules at the beginning.
That's gonna be the challenge.
You're gonna have a gavel with him.
Paul Briggs says he's,
Paul
that's
can just
what he
give you
does.
that look, you know.
He said he's gonna be good at it.
All right. All right. Anything else tonight under reports? No?
Sorry.
Under reports for you, Laura or Dave?
So tomorrow night, I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation on the Schaefer homes to the town board. And we worked in conjunction with the Kelly Adirondack Center, collecting some information. And I've been traipsing around the streets of Niskayuna, documenting a bunch of different houses, met some really great homeowners, found some really good information. And they're going to piggyback that off of the Adirondack Center is going to have a tent at Niskaday. And they're going to have a form for anyone that thinks they have or know that they have a Schaefer home to fill out. And then we'll
I
keep
like
collecting
that.
more info.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent.
So, and the point of one of the points of the presentation is to get the Niska Day event out, but hopefully also to get the town board on board with us continuing to move forward with the placarding and the documentation and stuff like
Right.
that.
To get we're looking to get local recognition by the town that these are historically contributing structure, buildings and properties within the town. It's created neighborhoods and really contributed to the aesthetics of, several areas.
Beautiful.
And they'll be individually listed in the next comp plan.
I don't think you need to do that.
You may not have to when we're done with it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
it.
Anything else? Okay. All right. Do you have anything else, Laura? No.
You were coming down the line, right?
No, I didn't get there yet,
Oh, okay.
but I will get there. That was reports. Okay, commission business. Mr. Diapino, you have anything else?
None.
Mr. Oster?
Nothing.
Mr. McPartlin?
No.
Mr. Khan?
So just a couple. So Mo, I'm sorry. That was just bizarre. And
You know what? I think it was completely inaccurate and unfair, but I did not feel it was, I did not clearly, they've been setting out a path towards litigating this, or I shouldn't say clearly, the letter seems to suggest that that's what their path is. And while I think I was tempted to just ignore, just to say, no, I don't agree.
Yeah.
I also did not want my vote on this to become an issue down the line.
And so the other thing is, I'd formally like to request, and we don't have to do it in this meeting because it's late, but I think we probably need to create a little checklist template, identify some resources, and how do you get every developer to give us an assessment of the historic nature of whatever the property is they're developing? Because honestly, if Mrs. Holmes had come in here and this was forefront in our minds, I would have acted very differently on what we approved there. And so,
I thought she sort of left people with the impression that she was going to protect the remaining
so I'll
site.
speak for myself and what I
She
knew.
did.
I had
Then
no,
she didn't.
I had no clue that the historical significance of that property was what it is. I'm
Well-
glad we know it now.
I think the historical significance is still debatable.
I don't think so. I
From a
disagree.
historic perspective, it is.
Right, I disagree.
I used to hang out with a bunch of historians too, so.
Well, that's
And
okay.
you
That's
can
why we
argue
have
it both
lots of
ways.
different
It's
opinions on the
debatable.
planning board.
Yeah. So in any case, I mean, there's got to be a process for doing that, right? Giving that responsibility to the developer to at least make an assessment of.
Yeah, so your point is to create a
step
checklist,
in
which
a-
I think makes sense, so that we have like a normal protocol of what's submitted. What happens if you leave that to the developer is not unlike when they submit their short form EAF, which to them, nothing is historically significant.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense. We need to find a way to actually make people provide real information.
Yeah. I know the EF has something about it, but
Yeah.
it needs to be a little more precise then. It's got to be, I don't know how we'll do it, but I think we need to, right? We've got to learn, right?
Yeah, we're going to ask the questions more than we
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
because I'll be honest with you, I know we're still on the record, right? I'm concerned actually that the property is still privately owned by the developer,
Yeah.
right? So,
Well, the town probably does not want to purchase it, you know that.
Well, it's all really important stuff that we were looking for, and I think it's
Yeah.
really good discussion that moves the town forward.
Yep.
And I mean, we took action here. We'll see what follows. I mean, he certainly could resubmit a different sketch plan, or he can appeal our decision. It's really entirely up to him, but we're here to just continue to look at these issues. That's what we do. And I think you guys do a great job, and I love listening to the thank yous because I feel that way about what you guys do too. I think you really do a good job.
yeah, I mean, the reality, we are at the last frontiers of development in the town. And so it's the remaining opportunities to both preserve the history of the town and to be able to do sensible, reasonable
Yeah,
development.
it's just gonna get harder. All the easy stuff is gone.
Every time. Yeah, no, point taken.
A lot of the land that remains is extremely challenging.
It's just gonna be more and more challenging. It absolutely is.
Anything else, Mr. Khan?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Goldberg? Anything?
Nope.
Ms. Shinfield?
Nope.
I have nothing except for a thank you, long night, appreciate it, and thank you, Mr. McPartland, nice job on 1380,
yep.
appreciate your hard work there.
Thank you. Thank you for
All
your
right, motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Khan, second by Ms. Gold, look like?
Yes.
All right, thank you, everybody, thanks, Jeff. Nora.
Right. Move my arm, that's close enough.
Yeah, no, it's there.